Welcome to the Late Lab. It's lovely to have you here. Before settling in, it would be wonderful to know where in the world you're listening from tonight. Maybe you're tucked beneath a blanket in a quiet room. Maybe you're resting on the sofa after a long day. Maybe you're somewhere between fully awake and almost asleep, with the lights low and the world finally becoming a little less demanding. Wherever you are, hopefully you feel warm, comfortable, and ready to let your thoughts slow down. If these calm little journeys through science help you relax, drift, or simply learn something gentle before sleep, leaving a like and subscribing is a lovely way to support the channel. And to those already here, already subscribed and already returning for another quiet evening of curiosity, thank you. Your support really does help this sleepy corner of the internet keep glowing. Now, tonight's subject is sleep itself, which is slightly dangerous territory for a channel designed to help people nod off. The plan is to explore how the brain quietly rebuilds itself while you rest, without making the whole thing so fascinating that sleep becomes impossible. But if that does happen, at least you'll be lying there with a deeper appreciation for memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and the strange little cleaning system that may be rinsing through the brain while the rest of you is doing absolutely nothing. Biologically speaking, that is quite impressive laziness. So let's begin, shall we? What really happens inside the brain when you fall asleep? And why is the quietest part of the day often one of the busiest? Sleep can feel like a gentle disappearance. One moment there is a room, a pillow, a half-finished thought drifting through the mind, and the quiet sense of being here. Then awareness loosens. The edges of the day soften. Time seems to fold itself away. Hours pass without being noticed, and by morning it may feel as though the brain simply went dark for a while, like a house with all the lamps turned off. But sleep is not a shutdown state. The brain does not switch off. It changes work. During waking life, the brain is busy facing outward. It watches the world through the senses. It listens, compares, predicts, remembers, reacts, and decides. Light arrives through the eyes, sound enters through the ears. Touch, temperature, balance, hunger, pain, emotion, language, and memory all compete for attention. Even a quiet day is not quiet inside the nervous system. The brain is always making a model of what is happening, what might happen next, and what should be done about it. Sleep changes that arrangement. The outside world becomes less important. The brain still notices certain signals, because a loud alarm, a crying baby, or a mysterious crash from the kitchen can still pull a sleeping person awake. But the threshold changes. Ordinary sounds fade. The room recedes. The brain reduces its attention to active perception and begins shifting resources toward internal maintenance. It is less like a machine being powered down and more like a busy building after closing time, when the doors are locked, the visitors leave, and the cleaners, engineers, and night staff begin their quieter work. This is why sleep feels passive from the inside. Conscious awareness is the part of the mind that notices experience directly. It is the sense of being awake, present, and able to follow a thought from one moment to the next. During sleep, especially during deep sleep, that awareness can become faint or vanish completely. There may be no clear sense of time passing, no steady self observing the room, no neat record of each hour. From the inside, sleep may feel like nothing at all, yet unconscious regulation is not nothing. The brain continues to control breathing, body temperature, heart rhythms, hormone release, immune signals, and countless other processes that do not require deliberate awareness. Neurons continue to communicate. Electrical activity shifts into organized patterns. Chemical messengers rise and fall. The sleeping brain is still alive with movement, but it is movement with different priorities. One of those priorities is memory consolidation. During the day, the brain gathers far more information than it can keep with equal importance. A conversation, a new skill, a worrying moment, a useful fact, a route through an unfamiliar street, and the exact shape of a sandwich all enter the nervous system. Some of these things matter. Some are just mental packaging. Sleep helps the brain stabilize certain memories, weaken others, and connect new experiences with older knowledge. It does not simply save the entire day like a perfect recording. It edits, sorts, and integrates. Sleep also helps regulate emotion. A tired brain can become unusually dramatic, as anyone who has ever felt personally betrayed by a cupboard door can understand. Poor sleep can make irritation sharper, worry louder, and decisions more fragile. During healthy sleep, emotional circuits and regulatory brain regions have a chance to recalibrate. Difficult experiences are not erased, but the intensity attached to them may change. The brain may preserve the fact that something happened while slowly softening the grip of feeling around it. Hormone coordination is another part of the sleeping brain's work. Hormones are chemical messengers that help regulate growth, stress, appetite, metabolism, repair, and daily rhythm. Sleep interacts with melatonin, cortisol, growth hormone, insulin, leptin, ghrelin, and many others. These signals are not random background details. They help the body know when to rest, when to prepare for waking, when to release energy, and when to support repair. The brain is deeply involved in this timing, especially through regions such as the hypothalamus, which helps coordinate many automatic functions. Sleep is also linked with immune support. The immune system and the nervous system speak to each other through chemical signals, including cytokines, which help coordinate inflammation and defense. When the body is fighting infection, sleepiness often increases. That is not just laziness wearing a blanket. It reflects a change in biological priorities. Rest can help conserve energy and support immune activity, while chronic sleep disruption can disturb the body's ability to regulate inflammation and respond well to stress. Metabolic balance matters too. The brain is small compared with the whole body, but it uses a remarkably large share of the body's energy. Thinking, sensing, learning, remembering, and regulating all require fuel. Sleep helps manage energy use and supports the stability of glucose regulation, appetite signaling, and cellular function. A brain that never had time to restore itself would not simply become sleepy. It would become less accurate, less emotionally steady, and less able to make clear choices. Then there is cellular maintenance. Cells produce waste products as they work, and brain cells are no exception. Modern research has drawn attention to the glymphatic system, a fluid clearance pathway that appears to help move cerebrospinal fluid through brain tissue and carry away certain waste products. This system has been strongly associated with sleep in animal studies, and scientists continue to investigate exactly how it works in humans. The important idea is simple enough. The brain may use sleep partly to maintain the chemical environment needed for healthy function. This is where the phrase sleep architecture becomes useful. Sleep is not one flat stretch of unconsciousness. It has structure. Across the night, the brain moves through a repeating pattern of sleep stages. These include non-rapid eye movement sleep, which contains lighter sleep and deep slow-wave sleep, and rapid eye movement sleep, which is often associated with vivid dreaming and highly active brain patterns. A full night is more like a carefully changing landscape than a single dark room. These stages matter because different patterns of sleep are linked with different kinds of work. Deep slow-wave sleep is associated with large synchronized brain rhythms, physical restoration, and some forms of memory processing. Rapid eye movement sleep is linked with dreaming, emotional processing, and other forms of memory integration. Lighter sleep helps the brain drift away from wakefulness, while still maintaining some connection to the surrounding world. The brain does not do the same thing all night. It changes tasks again and again in a rhythm that most people never consciously witness. The National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke describes sleep as important for many brain and body functions, including communication between nerve cells. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine helps define and classify sleep stages and sleep disorders in clinical and scientific settings. Together with many sleep researchers, these organizations reflect a central truth of modern neuroscience. Sleep is not empty time. It is an essential biological state, so the stillness of sleep is slightly deceptive. A sleeping person may look quiet, soft and absent from the world. But beneath that calm surface, the brain is changing its chemistry, shaping memories, tuning emotional responses, coordinating hormones, supporting immunity, balancing metabolism, and maintaining cells. It has withdrawn from the bright, demanding theatre of waking life so it can do work that waking life does not easily allow. Sleep is not the end of activity. It is the beginning of a different kind of activity. The mind may drift away, but the brain remains present, patient, and busy in the dark, preparing the conditions that allow another day of thought to appear. Long before the modern world learned how to interrupt sleep with alarm clocks, late messages, bright screens, traffic noise, and the bold decision to drink coffee after dinner, life on Earth was already moving to an older rhythm. That rhythm came from the turning of the planet beneath the sun. Every day, Earth rotates through light and darkness. Morning arrives, shadows shorten, heat builds, evening returns, and night spreads across the surface again. For billions of years, living things have had to adapt to that dependable cycle. Plants open and close parts of themselves in response to light. Insects emerge at certain hours. Birds begin their dawn chorus with almost suspicious confidence. Predators and prey organize their lives around when it is safest, warmest, darkest, brightest, or easiest to find food. Sleep belongs to this ancient pattern. It is not simply a modern inconvenience that gets in the way of productivity, entertainment, or scrolling through one more thing that absolutely could have waited until morning. It is a biological rhythm shaped by evolution. Across the animal kingdom, sleep or sleep-like states appear in mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, insects, and even simpler creatures with nervous systems very different from ours. The details vary enormously, but the broad idea keeps returning. Living bodies need periods of reduced responsiveness. At first, that seems like a strange bargain. A sleeping animal is less alert. It cannot search for food, defend itself as quickly, or respond to danger with the same speed. A small animal sleeping in the wrong place may become, from the point of view of a predator, less of a fellow creature and more of a convenient snack with poor situational awareness. So the fact that sleep has remained so widespread suggests that it must offer powerful benefits. If evolution has kept such a vulnerable state, then sleep is probably doing something important. Part of that importance lies in timing. The brain does not rebuild itself properly just because a person eventually collapses into bed. Sleep works best when it is coordinated with the body's wider daily rhythm. This is where circadian rhythms become essential. Circadian rhythms are roughly 24-hour biological cycles that help organize sleep, alertness, hormone release, body temperature, digestion, metabolism, and many other processes. The word circadian comes from Latin roots meaning about a day, which is a nicely modest phrase for one of the most important timing systems in biology. These rhythms are influenced by the outside world, especially light and darkness, but they are also generated internally. Even without ordinary daylight cues, the human body still tends to follow an internal cycle, close to 24 hours, though it may drift without regular signals from the environment. This is why light matters so much. It does not simply let the eyes see the world, it helps set the body's clock. Deep within the brain, in the hypothalamus, sits a tiny region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The name sounds like something a wizard might mutter while trying to open a very sleepy door, but it has a clear meaning. It sits above the optic chiasm, the place where some nerve fibres from the eyes cross. The suprachiasmatic nucleus acts as the brain's master clock. It receives information about light from specialized cells in the retina, particularly cells sensitive to brightness and blue-enriched daylight. These signals help the brain work out whether the outside world is in its daytime or nighttime phase. From there, the suprachiasmatic nucleus helps coordinate timing throughout the body. It influences patterns of alertness, body temperature, hormone release, and sleep readiness. It is not the only clock in the body. Many tissues have their own local molecular clocks, including the liver, heart, lungs, and muscles. But the suprachiasmatic nucleus helps keep these clocks aligned, rather like a conductor guiding an orchestra that would otherwise gradually begin playing several different songs at once. One of the best-known signals in this rhythm is melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone released by the pineal gland, a small structure near the center of the brain. As evening darkness increases, melatonin levels usually rise, helping signal biological night to the body. It is important, though, not to imagine melatonin as a simple sleep switch. It does not knock the brain unconscious like a tiny chemical hammer. Instead, it helps tell the body that night has arrived. It supports the timing of sleep, especially when the body's internal clock needs a darkness signal. This is why bright light at night can confuse the system. If the eyes receive strong light when the body expects darkness, the brain may delay its night signals. The effect varies between people, and ordinary life is more complicated than a single rule about screens or lamps. Still, the principle is clear. Light is not just decoration. To the circadian system, light is information. Modern understanding of circadian rhythms has been shaped by decades of research, including the work of Jeffrey Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael Young. Their discoveries in fruit flies revealed important molecular mechanisms behind circadian clocks, including genes and proteins that rise and fall in daily cycles. Their work helped earn the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2017. Fruit flies may not seem like obvious guides to the mysteries of human sleep, especially because they rarely look well rested, but they helped reveal that biological timekeeping is built into cells at a molecular level. This matters because sleep is not isolated from the rest of the body. The brain's nightly work depends on timing. Memory consolidation, hormone coordination, temperature changes, immune signaling, and metabolic regulation all fit into daily rhythms. When sleep arrives at the right biological time, it can unfold more smoothly. When the timing is repeatedly disrupted, the brain may still sleep, but the sleep can become less aligned with the body's deeper cycles. That is one reason shift work, jet lag, and irregular sleep schedules can feel so strangely heavy. The problem is not only that sleep may be shorter, it may also be misplaced. The body can be asked to sleep when its internal clock is promoting alertness, then stay awake when its chemistry is preparing for rest. It is a bit like asking the whole orchestra to perform a lullaby while the percussion section has confidently started a parade. The ancient rhythm of sleeping and waking reminds us that sleep is not merely a personal habit. It is biology, keeping time with the planet. Each night, the brain does not rebuild itself in isolation. It does so as part of a wider rhythm involving light, darkness, hormones, temperature, cells, organs, and the slow, dependable turning of Earth. The mind may drift away, but the body is still listening to the oldest clock it has. From the moment waking begins, something quiet starts to gather. It does not usually arrive all at once. In the morning, after decent sleep, the mind may feel clear enough. The room has edges, the day has shape, thoughts step forward without too much effort. The brain begins taking in light, sound, movement, decisions, conversations, tiny frustrations, small pleasures, and the steady flow of information that comes with being alive and conscious. But as the hours pass, the need for sleep slowly builds. This growing need is often called sleep pressure. It is the biological pull towards sleep that accumulates during wakefulness and fades during sleep. It is not exactly the same as feeling tired, although the two are closely related. A person can feel mentally tired after a difficult task, physically tired after exercise, or emotionally tired after a stressful day. Sleep pressure is more specific. It is the brain and body gradually becoming more ready for sleep, the longer wakefulness continues. Sleep pressure is part of homeostasis, the biological principle that living systems work to keep internal conditions within a useful range. Body temperature, blood sugar, hydration, acidity, and many other processes are regulated this way. Sleep has its own version of balance. Wakefulness creates a need that sleep helps reduce. The longer a person stays awake, the stronger that need tends to become. Then, during sleep, the pressure eases. One important chemical in this process is adenosine. Adenosine builds up in parts of the brain during wakefulness and contributes to the feeling of sleepiness. It is connected to energy use. When brain cells are active, they use energy, and the chemical pathways involved in energy metabolism are linked with the gradual accumulation of adenosine. The longer the brain remains awake and active, the more adenosine can signal that rest is becoming necessary. Adenosine does not work like a tiny sandman wandering through the brain with a bag of dream dust, although that would be charming and extremely difficult to publish in a respectable neuroscience journal. It works by interacting with adenosine receptors. When adenosine binds to these receptors, it helps promote sleepiness and reduces certain patterns of arousal. In simple terms, it is one of the brain's ways of saying, very politely at first, that wakefulness is becoming expensive. This is where caffeine enters the story, looking suspiciously cheerful for a chemical that has caused so many optimistic morning decisions. Caffeine can temporarily reduce tiredness because it blocks adenosine receptors. It does not remove adenosine itself. It mainly prevents adenosine from delivering its full sleepy message for a while. The underlying sleep pressure is still there, building in the background. Caffeine is more like covering the fuel gauge than refilling the tank. That is why caffeine can feel so useful and also slightly deceptive. A cup of coffee or tea may increase alertness, improve concentration, and make the day feel more manageable. But once caffeine begins to wear off, adenosine can again act on its receptors, and the sleepiness that was being masked may become noticeable. This is sometimes described as a caffeine crash. Though it is less a dramatic collapse and more the brain resuming a conversation it was rudely interrupted from earlier. Caffeine also has a half-life, meaning it can remain active in the body for several hours. The exact timing varies between people because of genetics, age, liver metabolism, medication, pregnancy, and other factors. For some, caffeine later in the day can interfere with sleep, even if they feel able to fall asleep. The brain may enter sleep, but the architecture of that sleep can be affected, especially if arousal systems remain more active than they otherwise would be. Sleep pressure does not act alone. The body also follows circadian timing, the roughly 24-hour rhythm shaped by the brain's master clock, light exposure, body temperature, and hormonal signals. These two forces work together. The circadian system helps decide when sleep and wakefulness are biologically favoured. Sleep pressure reflects how long the brain has been awake and how strongly it needs recovery. The interaction between these systems was famously described by the sleep researcher Alexander Bohr-Bailey in the two-process model of sleep regulation. This model describes sleep as being shaped mainly by two processes. One is homeostatic sleep pressure, which rises during wakefulness and falls during sleep. The other is circadian timing, which follows a daily rhythm and helps regulate when the body is most alert or most ready for sleep. The two-process model helps explain something familiar. Many people feel increasingly sleepy late at night because sleep pressure has been building all day and the circadian system is also beginning to favour sleep. But it also explains why sleepiness does not always rise in a simple straight line. There can be a late afternoon dip, an evening second wind, or a strange burst of alertness at the very moment a sensible person planned to go to bed. The brain is not a simple battery. It is a timed biological system, which is beautiful, complex, and occasionally deeply inconvenient. Waking life creates this pressure because being awake is demanding. The brain is constantly processing sensory information, maintaining attention, forming memories, regulating emotion, coordinating movement, and making predictions. Even ordinary decisions take work. What to eat, what to answer, where to look, whether that noise matters, whether the message needs a reply now or can safely become tomorrow's problem, where it will join several other brave little problems in a queue. All of this activity produces a kind of biological debt, not debt in a moral sense. Sleep is not a punishment for being awake, and sleepiness is not a personal failure. It is simply the cost of consciousness. Wakefulness uses resources, changes chemical conditions, strengthens some neural connections, stresses regulatory systems, and fills the brain with traces of experience. Sleep helps resolve those changes. It lowers sleep pressure, restores useful rhythms, supports memory processing, and gives the brain time to recalibrate. This is why staying awake too long can gradually change the mind. Attention becomes less steady. Reactions slow. Emotional control becomes weaker. Working memory becomes less reliable. The brain may still function, but it becomes less precise. It's rather like trying to keep a busy kitchen running long after the counters need clearing, the bins need emptying, and someone has definitely misplaced the labels. Things can continue for a while, but the system becomes messier. As wakefulness stretches on, the brain becomes increasingly ready for the rebuilding work of sleep. The pressure that gathers through the day is not an enemy, it is a signal. It tells the body that the waking brain has done enough outward-facing work and now needs time for inward-facing repair. Adenosine, circadian timing, hormones, temperature rhythms, and neural activity all help guide that transition. So sleep pressure is one of the quiet forces that leads the brain back into the dark. It builds while the eyes are open, while thoughts are forming, while choices are made, while the world keeps arriving through the senses. Then, when sleep finally comes, that pressure begins to lift. The brain does not simply stop being tired, it starts paying back the ordinary biological cost of another day spent awake. Sleep may feel like one continuous descent, as if the mind slips beneath the surface and stays there until morning. But a night's sleep is not a single, unchanging state. It is arranged in cycles. The brain moves through different patterns of activity again and again, in a rhythm that is structured enough to study, but flexible enough to vary from one person to another, and even from one night to the next. A typical sleep cycle lasts roughly 90 minutes, though the exact length can shift across the night. Some cycles may be shorter, some may stretch longer. The first half of the night is not identical to the second half. Sleep has an internal landscape, with lighter slopes, deeper valleys, and strange bright regions where dreams can become vivid and emotionally intense. From the outside, a sleeping person may simply look still. Inside the brain, the night is changing shape. Modern sleep science usually divides sleep into two broad categories: non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep. Non-rapid eye movement sleep is often shortened to non-REM sleep, while rapid eye movement sleep is shortened to REM sleep. In voiceover, it is perfectly reasonable to say rapid eye movement sleep when the term first appears, then REM afterward if needed. These two categories are not just labels, they reflect different patterns of brain activity, muscle tone, eye movement, dreaming, and body regulation. Non-rapid eye movement sleep makes up most of a typical night. It includes the stages that carry the brain away from wakefulness and into deeper sleep. The first stage is the lightest. This is the soft borderland between being awake and being asleep. Thoughts may loosen, images may drift across the mind. A person may feel as though they are still awake, even though brain activity has already begun to change. The body relaxes, eye movements slow, and awareness becomes less steady. It is the brain's quiet doorway into sleep. The second stage of non-rapid eye movement sleep is still considered light sleep, but it is more stable. During this stage, the brain shows distinctive patterns called sleep spindles and K-complexes. Sleep spindles are brief bursts of rhythmic brain activity, while K-complexes are larger wave patterns that may help the brain respond to important signals while ignoring harmless ones. In this stage, the sleeping person becomes less aware of the outside world. Breathing slows, heart rate settles, body temperature drops slightly. The brain is not deeply asleep yet, but it is clearly moving away from the open, attentiveness of waking life. Then comes deeper non-rapid eye movement sleep, often called slow wave sleep. This is the stage most strongly associated with large, slow brain waves. These waves can be measured with electroencephalography, a method that records electrical activity from the scalp. During slow-wave sleep, many neurons in the cerebral cortex shift together through patterns of activity and quietness. The result is a slower, more synchronized rhythm than the fast mixed activity often seen when a person is awake and alert. Slow-wave sleep is one of the most restorative parts of the night. It is linked with reduced responsiveness, physical recovery, immune regulation, growth hormone release, and certain kinds of memory processing. It is also the stage from which waking can feel especially heavy. Someone pulled suddenly out of deep sleep may feel confused, slow, and strangely offended by the entire concept of being conscious. That grogginess is called sleep inertia, and it is a reminder that the brain is not always ready to leap gracefully from its deepest rhythms into full conversation. After moving through non-rapid eye movement sleep, the brain eventually enters rapid eye movement sleep. REM sleep is one of the strangest states in ordinary human life. The brain becomes highly active, sometimes showing patterns that look closer to waking than to deep sleep. The eyes move rapidly beneath the eyelids. Dreams are often more vivid, visual, emotional, and story-like. At the same time, most voluntary muscles become temporarily paralyzed, a condition called muscle atonia. This helps prevent the body from acting out dreams. Without it, a dream about running across a field might become quite inconvenient for the bedside table. This combination is odd but useful, an active dreaming brain inside a mostly still body. REM sleep is associated with emotional processing, memory integration, and the brain's ability to link ideas in unusual ways. It is not the only stage in which dreams happen, because dreaming can occur during non-rapid eye movement sleep as well. But REM dreams are often the ones people remember as especially vivid, bizarre, or dramatic, as if the sleeping brain has briefly hired a theatre director with no concern for plot consistency. The discovery and classification of these sleep stages developed through important work in the 20th century. Nathaniel K. Littman is often called one of the founders of modern sleep research. At the University of Chicago, he studied sleep in a systematic way when the field was still young. Eugene Asarinsky, working with Kai Littman, helped identify rapid eye movement sleep in the early 1950s, after noticing periods of fast eye movements in sleeping subjects, including children. William Dement then helped expand REM sleep research and later became a major figure in sleep medicine. Alan Rechtschaffen also played a central role in standardizing the scoring of sleep stages, helping researchers describe the sleeping brain with more consistent rules. This history matters because sleep can easily be misunderstood when judged only by appearance. Before modern sleep research, it was tempting to think of sleep as a passive blank. But once scientists began recording brain activity, eye movements, muscle tone, breathing, and heart rhythms, the hidden structure became visible. Sleep was not empty, it was patterned. Across a normal night, these patterns repeat. A person usually moves from wakefulness into lighter, non-rapid eye movement sleep, then into deeper, slow-wave sleep, then back toward lighter sleep, and eventually into REM sleep. This cycle repeats several times, but the proportions change. Earlier in the night, deep, slow-wave sleep is usually more prominent. Later in the night, REM sleep periods tend to become longer and more frequent. This means that the brain does not spend the night doing the same kind of work at the same intensity. It shifts emphasis as the hours pass. The first part of the night may be especially important for the pressure built up during the day. Deep sleep helps reduce that pressure and supports physical and neural restoration. The later part of the night, with more REM sleep, may play a larger role in emotional processing and some forms of memory integration. This is a simplification, because sleep stages overlap in their functions, and scientists are still studying exactly how they interact. But the broad principle is clear: different stages appear to support different kinds of rebuilding. This is why sleep architecture matters. The phrase describes the organized pattern of sleep stages across the night. Good sleep is not only about the number of hours spent in bed, it is also about whether the brain can move through its stages in a healthy rhythm. Fragmented sleep, repeated awakenings, breathing disturbances, stress, alcohol, illness, and irregular schedules can all alter that architecture. A person may spend enough time under the blanket, yet still wake feeling unrefreshed if the deeper structure of sleep has been disrupted. The architecture of sleep shows that rebuilding is not one single task. Memory consolidation, emotional regulation, immune signaling, hormone release, cellular maintenance, and preparation for the next day all appear to depend on a changing sequence of brain states. The night is not a blank stretch between one day and the next. It is more like a quiet workshop with different rooms lighting up at different hours. While awareness rests, the brain moves through its hidden pattern: light sleep, deeper sleep, dreaming sleep, and back again. Each cycle carries the mind through another turn of restoration and adjustment. By morning, nothing obvious may seem to have happened. The room may look the same, the pillow may look slightly more defeated, but inside the brain, the night has had architecture, rhythm, and purpose. Falling asleep is rarely a clean, sharp moment. It is not usually a neat doorway where waking stands on one side and sleep waits politely on the other. More often, it is a slow loosening. The mind does not vanish all at once. It drifts, returns, wanders, forgets what it was thinking, and then somehow slips a little further away. At the edge of sleep, the brain begins lowering its responsiveness. The outside world is still there, but it starts to matter less. A sound in the room may be noticed, then ignored. The weight of the body against the mattress becomes less central. Thoughts become less controlled. The mind may begin a perfectly sensible idea and then, without warning, turn it into something about a train station, a childhood kitchen, or a penguin wearing a very serious expression. This is not usually a sign that anything has gone wrong. It is the ordinary borderland between waking and sleep, where conscious thought begins to lose its tidy grip. This early transition is often called Stage 1 non-rapid eye movement sleep. It is the lightest form of sleep, and it can be surprisingly easy to disturb. A person awakened from this stage may insist they were not asleep at all. In a way, that makes sense. The experience can feel thin and uncertain, not quite waking and not quite sleep. Brain activity begins to slow compared with relaxed wakefulness. Eye movements become slower, and muscle tone starts to decrease. The brain is not deeply restored yet, but it has begun to shift away from the active, outward-facing mode of the day. This is also the place where hypnic jerks can appear. A hypnic jerk is a sudden muscle twitch that happens as someone is falling asleep. It may feel like a small jolt, a sudden drop, or the body's dramatic attempt to save itself from a cliff that does not exist. The exact cause is not fully settled, but hypnic jerks are common and usually harmless. They may be linked with the nervous system relaxing unevenly, with muscle tone changing, or with the brain misreading the body's descent into sleep. It is one of those moments where the body seems to say, "Just checking we are not falling into a ravine," while everyone else in the room was simply trying to rest. Brief dreamlike impressions can also appear near this edge. These are sometimes called hypnagogic experiences. They may include flashes of imagery, fragments of sound, drifting words, faces, colours, or little scenes that do not quite become full dreams. They're usually short and strange, like scraps of a story that has not yet found its plot. The waking mind is still close enough to notice them, but the sleeping brain is already beginning to loosen ordinary logic. This can make the transition feel oddly creative, peaceful, or occasionally baffling. As sleep becomes more stable, the brain moves into Stage 2 non-rapid eye movement sleep. This stage occupies a large portion of a typical night, and it is much more than a waiting room before deeper sleep. Stage 2 has its own distinctive patterns, especially sleep spindles and K complexes. These patterns are measured using electroencephalography, which records electrical activity from the scalp and allows researchers to observe the changing rhythms of the sleeping brain. Sleep spindles are brief bursts of rhythmic brain activity. They usually last only a few seconds, but they appear again and again during Stage 2 sleep. They are generated through interactions between the thalamus and the cerebral cortex. The thalamus is a deep brain structure involved in relaying sensory information, while the cerebral cortex is the folded outer layer of the brain involved in perception, thought, memory, language, and many other higher functions. During sleep, these regions do not simply go silent. They communicate in organised patterns that help shape the brain's changing state. One important idea connected with sleep spindles is sensory gating. Sensory gating means filtering information so that not every sound, touch, or minor disturbance fully reaches awareness. During Stage 2 sleep, the brain must perform a delicate balancing act. It needs to remain asleep, but not so disconnected that danger cannot wake the body. Sleep spindles may help protect sleep by reducing the impact of ordinary background noise, allowing harmless sounds to pass without pulling consciousness back into the room. A distant car, a creaking floorboard, or the soft hum of a heater may be quietly filed under not urgent, which is one of the brain's kinder administrative decisions. Sleep spindles are also linked with memory processing. Research suggests they may help support the stabilization of newly learned information, especially when they occur in coordination with other sleep rhythms. They do not work alone, and they are not the whole story of memory consolidation. but they appear to be one part of the brain's overnight sorting system. Even in light sleep, before the deeper stages arrive, the brain is already beginning to reshape the traces of waking experience. K-complexes are another important feature of stage 2 sleep. A K-complex is a large sudden wave of brain activity. It can happen spontaneously, or it can be triggered by an outside sound. Like sleep spindles, K-complexes seem to help the brain manage the boundary between the sleeping body and the surrounding world. They may allow the brain to register a stimulus without fully waking, as if it briefly lifts one internal eyebrow, decides the matter is not worth a full emergency meeting, and settles back down. Together, these patterns show that light sleep is not shallow in the sense of being unimportant. It is light because the sleeper can still be awakened more easily than in deep, slow-wave sleep. But biologically, it is active and organised. The brain is beginning to separate itself from the world in a controlled way. It is filtering the senses, reducing responsiveness, stabilising sleep, and preparing the conditions for deeper restoration. This gradual separation matters. The brain cannot move smoothly into deeper rebuilding while it is still fully engaged with every passing sound and sensation. Light sleep helps create a buffer. It lowers the volume of the outside world without cutting the wires completely. It lets the thalamus and cerebral cortex shift into rhythms that protect rest, support early memory processing, and guide the nervous system away from waking alertness. So the first descent into sleep is not empty drifting. It is a carefully managed transition. Thoughts become loose, the body relaxes, little jolts and strange images may appear, and then the brain begins building a quieter wall between itself and the room. Light sleep is the soft beginning of the night's work. It is the dimming of the doorway before the deeper chambers of sleep open. Deep sleep is where the night becomes heaviest. By the time the brain reaches slow-wave sleep, the light drifting of early sleep has given way to something much deeper and harder to disturb. The outside world has not disappeared completely, but it has been pushed far into the background. A quiet sound may pass unnoticed. A familiar room may no longer exist in awareness. If someone is awakened suddenly from this state, they may return slowly, confused for a few moments, as if consciousness has had to travel a long way back. Slow-wave sleep is the deepest form of non-rapid eye movement sleep. Its name comes from the large, slow patterns of electrical activity seen across the brain. These rhythms can be measured with electroencephalography, a method that records electrical signals from the scalp. During waking life, brain activity is often fast, mixed, and complex because the brain is busy responding to the world. During slow-wave sleep, activity becomes more synchronized. Vast groups of neurons in the cerebral cortex begin shifting together through patterns of activity and quietness. This does not mean the brain is inactive. Slow-wave sleep is active in a beautifully coordinated way. Many cortical neurons move through alternating states, sometimes becoming more electrically active, then falling into quieter phases. These waves travel across areas of the cortex like slow pulses through a darkened city. It is less like a power cut, and more like an organized lowering and lifting of internal lights. This synchronized rhythm is one reason deep sleep seems so restorative. The brain is no longer spending so much effort on detailed perception, conversation, balance, planning, and social interpretation. It has moved away from the busy outward traffic of the day. That gives the body and brain a chance to shift toward maintenance. Heart rate and breathing often become slower and more regular. Blood pressure may fall. The sympathetic nervous system, which helps prepare the body for action, becomes less dominant, while calmer restorative processes are given more room. Deep sleep is also linked with growth hormone release. Growth hormone is not only important for children growing taller, though it certainly has that role. In adults, it also helps support tissue repair, metabolism, muscle maintenance, and the regulation of many body processes. The hypothalamus helps regulate hormone signals. It works closely with the pituitary gland. During sleep, especially early deep sleep, this hypothalamus and pituitary gland relationship helps shape the timing of growth hormone pulses. This is one of the reasons sleep belongs to the whole body, not just the brain. Deep sleep supports physical restoration, immune function, and metabolic balance. The immune system uses sleep as part of its wider regulation, including the control of inflammatory signals and the body's response to infection. When deep sleep is repeatedly disrupted, the effects can ripple outward into alertness, mood, recovery, and general health. Sleep is not a decorative luxury added to life after the important things are finished. It is one of the important things. Slow-wave sleep also appears to matter for memory, especially declarative memory. Declarative memory is memory for facts, places, events, meanings, and information that can usually be consciously described. Remembering the name of a city, the details of a conversation, the layout of a new building, or the fact that mitochondria are often described as the powerhouses of the cell, all belong broadly in this world. That last example has worked very hard in classrooms and deserves a comfortable chair. During waking hours, new memories are often fragile. They can be disrupted, blurred, or overwritten. Sleep helps stabilize some of them. Slow-wave sleep is thought to support communication between the hippocampus and the neocortex. The hippocampus is important for forming many new memories, while the neocortex stores knowledge in wide distributed networks. During deep sleep, patterns of activity associated with recent experiences may be reactivated, helping new information become more firmly connected to existing knowledge. Research by Jan Bourne and others has been important in showing how sleep supports memory consolidation. In sleep-dependent memory consolidation, the brain does not simply replay the day like a perfect film. It seems to reactivate, strengthen, reorganize, and integrate selected traces of experience. Slow oscillations, sleep spindles, and hippocampal sharp wave ripples are thought to work together in this process. The names sound technical, but the basic idea is gentle enough. The sleeping brain helps move useful memories from a temporary state toward a more stable one. This does not mean every fact learned before bed will be perfectly preserved by morning. Sleep is not a magical filing clerk with flawless handwriting. Attention, repetition, emotional relevance, stress, health, age, and timing all influence what is remembered. But deep sleep gives the brain conditions that seem especially helpful for stabilizing certain kinds of knowledge. It helps turn some of the day's loose impressions into something more durable. Deep sleep is also a period when the brain becomes strongly protected from ordinary interruption. Compared with a light sleep, it takes a louder or more meaningful stimulus to wake someone. This reduced responsiveness is useful. It allows the brain to stay in its slow rhythms long enough for repair and recalibration to unfold. A harmless noise in the distance does not need to become a full conscious event. The brain can remain inward, continuing its quiet maintenance without reporting every creak of the house to the sleeping mind. There is something deeply strange about this. The state that looks most like stillness from the outside may be one of the most important states for keeping the brain ready for life. In deep sleep, the body is calm, the mind is absent or nearly absent, and yet essential work continues. Hormones are timed, immune signals are regulated, the nervous system settles, memories are stabilized. Neural networks shift through slow, coordinated waves. This is one of the major maintenance windows of the night. The brain becomes less concerned with the room, the clock, the day's unfinished tasks, and the small theatre of conscious thought. It turns toward internal recalibration. Slow-wave sleep is not dramatic. It does not usually announce itself with vivid dreams or memorable images. It is deeper than that, quieter than that, and in many ways more fundamental. While awareness rests in darkness, the brain moves through its slow waves of repair, preparing the mind and body to rise again with a little more order than they had before. Every waking day leaves traces behind. Some are clear and important. A conversation, a new idea, a face, a place, a skill, a warning, a small moment of joy. Others are almost weightless. The colour of a passing car, the exact pattern of crumbs on a plate, the third time a door was opened for no memorable reason. The brain cannot preserve every detail with equal care. If it tried, memory would become less like a library and more like a cupboard, where every receipt, sock, spoon, and mysterious cable had been declared historically significant. Memory consolidation is the process by which fragile new memories become more stable over time. When an experience first happens, its trace in the brain can be delicate. It may depend on temporary patterns of activity and newly changing connections between neurons. Over hours, days, and sometimes much longer, some of these traces become more durable. Sleep plays a major supporting role in that process, not by simply storing everything, but by helping the brain sort, strengthen, connect, and sometimes let go. A key structure in this story is the hippocampus. The hippocampus sits deep within the brain's temporal lobe, and it is especially important for forming many new declarative memories. Declarative memories include facts, places, events, and information that can usually be consciously described. The hippocampus acts less like a permanent warehouse and more like a temporary organizer. It helps bind together the different parts of an experience: what happened, where it happened, when it happened, and what it meant. Longer-term knowledge depends heavily on the neocortex, the folded outer layer of the brain involved in perception, language, thought, planning, and stored understanding. Memories in the neocortex are not kept in one neat drawer. They are distributed across networks. A memory of walking through a city may involve visual regions, sound associations, spatial maps, emotional signals, language, and older knowledge about streets, weather, buildings, and people. The brain stores meaning through patterns, not little labelled boxes. The gradual integration of memories into wider networks is called systems consolidation. In this process, new memories become less dependent on the hippocampus and more connected with long-term knowledge stored across the neocortex. This does not happen instantly. Some memories remain strongly linked with the hippocampus for a long time, especially rich personal memories. But the broad principle is that the brain slowly weaves new experience into what it already knows. The importance of the hippocampus became especially clear through the work of Brenda Milner and the famous patient Henry Molaison. After surgery removed major parts of his medial temporal lobes, including much of the hippocampal region, Henry Molaison was left unable to form many kinds of new long-term memories. He could hold information briefly, and he could learn some motor skills, but new events did not settle into lasting conscious memory in the usual way. His case helped transform neuroscience by showing that memory is not one single ability, and that the hippocampus is crucial for forming new declarative memories. At the level of cells, memory depends on synaptic plasticity. Synaptic plasticity is the ability of connections between neurons to change with experience. Some connections become stronger, others weaken. New patterns can form, and less useful patterns can become quieter. This is one of the basic ways the brain learns. A memory is not a tiny object placed somewhere inside the head. It is a living pattern of changed relationships among neurons. Sleep appears to help manage these changed relationships. During waking hours, the brain is constantly forming new associations. Some are worth keeping, some are not. During sleep, especially slow-wave sleep, the brain may reactivate patterns linked with recent experience. This is sometimes described as replay. It does not mean the brain watches the day again in perfect order, like a private film screening with questionable editing. Instead, patterns of neural activity related to learning can become active again, often in compressed or altered forms. This replay may help useful memories become more stable. It may also help connect new learning with older knowledge. A fact learned during the day can become more meaningful when the brain links it with related information already stored. A new route through a neighborhood can become easier to remember when it's tied to existing spatial maps. A conversation can settle into the wider story of a relationship. Sleep helps memory become less isolated and more integrated. Researchers such as Robert Stickgold and Matthew Walker have helped popularize and study the relationship between sleep, learning, and memory consolidation. Their work, along with the work of many other sleep scientists, supports the idea that sleep can improve certain kinds of learning and help stabilize newly acquired information. At the same time, the evidence should be understood carefully. Sleep is not a miracle button. It does not guarantee perfect recall, and not every study finds the same effects for every task. Memory depends on attention, emotional importance, repetition, health, age, timing, and the type of information being learned. Still, the overall picture is strong. Sleep gives the brain conditions that waking life does not easily provide. During the day, new information keeps arriving. The brain has to respond to the present moment. During sleep, the flow of outside input is reduced. The brain can revisit recent traces without constant interruption. It can strengthen some connections, quiet others, and gradually sort experience into more useful forms. This sorting is not only about keeping. Forgetting is also important. A brain that remembered every irrelevant detail would become cluttered and inefficient. Healthy memory requires selection. The sleeping brain may help preserve what is useful, while allowing weaker or less meaningful details to fade. This fading is not failure. It is part of mental housekeeping. Forgetting where every speck of dust landed yesterday is not a tragedy. It is mercy. Sleep also seems to support insight and pattern recognition. Sometimes, after rest, a problem feels clearer, or a skill feels smoother, or a piece of information is easier to retrieve. The brain has not been consciously working in the usual sense, but it has not been idle either. It has been reorganizing. It has been testing connections in the dark. So sleep is a nightly editor. It does not preserve the day exactly as it happened. It cuts, blends, strengthens, softens, and files. Some moments are kept with care. Some are attached to older knowledge. Some lose their sharpness. Some drift away entirely. By morning, the brain is not simply holding yesterday. It has quietly rewritten yesterday into a form that can be carried forward. Some memories are easy to describe: a name, a place, a fact, a sentence from a conversation. They can be brought into awareness and spoken aloud. But other memories live more quietly in the body and brain. They are not held as neat little statements. They are held as patterns of doing. This is procedural memory. It is memory for skills, habits, movements, and practiced actions. Riding a bicycle, typing on a keyboard, playing a piano scale, tying a shoelace, serving a tennis ball, pronouncing unfamiliar sounds in a new language, or learning the rhythm of a dance all involve procedural memory. These memories do not always need to be explained step by step. In fact, trying to explain them can sometimes make them worse, as anyone who has suddenly thought too hard about walking downstairs may quietly understand. Procedural memory shows that learning is not only about storing information, it is also about shaping performance. The brain must refine timing, coordination, prediction, sensation, and movement. A practice skill depends on many regions working together, including the motor cortex, cerebellum, basal ganglia, and thalamus. The motor cortex helps plan and send movement commands. The cerebellum helps adjust timing, precision, and error correction. The basal ganglia are important for habits, action selection, and learned movement patterns. The thalamus helps relay and coordinate signals between different parts of the brain. When a person practices something while awake, the brain lays down early traces of that practice. At first, these traces may be awkward and unstable. A beginner playing an instrument may press too hard, move too slowly, or forget which finger goes where. Someone learning a new sport may understand the instruction perfectly and still perform it with the grace of a folding chair. That is normal. Skill learning begins with effort, attention, mistakes, correction, and repetition. Sleep can help refine those patterns after practice. Studies of sleep and motor learning have often used tasks such as finger tapping sequences, where people learn a pattern of movements and are tested later. In some experiments, performance improves after sleep more than after an equivalent period awake. Other studies have looked at visual discrimination, motor sequences, perceptual learning, and language-related skills. The details vary by task, sleep stage, timing, and individual differences, but the broad finding is that sleep can support the stabilization and improvement of certain practiced abilities. This does not mean the brain magically learns without effort. Sleep is not a secret shortcut that replaces practice. A person cannot place a violin under the pillow and wake up ready for a concert, which is probably good news for neighbors everywhere. The brain needs waking experience first. It needs the attempt, the feedback, the repetition, the little failures, and the gradual correction. Sleep then helps work with what has already been created. It can stabilize useful patterns, reduce interference, and refine the neural traces formed during practice. One important idea is that newly learned skills are vulnerable. After practice, the brain has changed, but those changes may not yet be stable. Another task, distraction, fatigue, or time can interfere. Sleep may protect and strengthen the fresh pattern. It gives the nervous system a quieter environment in which recent learning can be reorganized. The outside world becomes less demanding, and the brain can revisit parts of what it has practiced. Research traditions in sleep and motor memory include studies associated with Matthew Walker, Robert Stickgold, Carlisle Smith, and many others. Their work has helped show that sleep is not only useful for remembering facts, but also for refining certain kinds of performance. Some findings suggest that different stages of sleep may contribute in different ways. Stage 2 sleep, with its sleep spindles, has been linked with aspects of motor learning. Slow-wave sleep and rapid eye movement sleep may also contribute depending on the kind of skill being studied. The brain does not use one simple overnight tool for every kind of learning. It appears to use several. Sleep spindles are especially interesting here. These brief bursts of rhythmic brain activity occur during stage 2 non-rapid eye movement sleep and involve communication between the thalamus and the cerebral cortex. They may help coordinate the reactivation and strengthening of certain neural patterns. In motor learning, this could mean helping a practiced movement sequence become more efficient. The skill is not being consciously rehearsed. The sleeping person is not lying there silently performing a finger-tapping exercise in the mind with heroic dedication. But the brain may still be replaying and refining parts of the pattern. The cerebellum also matters because practiced movement depends on prediction and correction. When someone learns a motor skill, the brain must compare intended movement with actual movement. If the result is slightly wrong, the system adjusts. Over time, actions become smoother because the brain gets better at predicting what will happen. Sleep may help consolidate these adjustments, allowing the next attempt to begin from a more organised starting point. The basal ganglia are important for habits and repeated actions. A skill that begins as effortful can gradually become more automatic. This is one reason practice changes the feeling of a task. At first, every detail needs attention. Later, the movement seems to unfold with less conscious control. Sleep may help support this gradual shift, strengthening the networks that allow useful actions to become more fluent. Perceptual learning works in a similar spirit, though it may involve the senses more than the muscles. A person may learn to distinguish sounds in a new language, recognize subtle visual patterns, or improve at detecting small differences in shape or motion. Sleep can help the brain stabilize these improvements. The world may look or sound slightly easier to interpret after rest, not because reality has changed, but because the brain has become better prepared to read it. Language learning also depends on sleep in several ways. New vocabulary, pronunciation patterns, grammar structures, and sound categories all place demands on memory systems. Sleep can help consolidate word meanings and support the integration of new sounds into existing language networks. Again, it does not replace study or practice, but it can help make waking effort more durable. This is one of the gentler truths about learning. Progress does not happen only during the visible attempt. It also happens afterward, in the quiet spaces where the brain continues adjusting. Practice creates the raw material. Sleep helps shape it. The improvement may be small, but small improvements matter. A movement becomes a little smoother. A sequence becomes a little faster. A sound becomes easier to recognize. A task that felt clumsy yesterday may feel slightly less wobbly today. So when sleep rebuilds the brain, it is not only repairing damage or clearing waste. It is also preparing learned patterns for future use. The sleeping brain takes the day's practice and asks what can be made more stable, more efficient, more available. It turns effort into memory and memory into readiness. By morning, the skill may not be mastered, but it may be better held. And sometimes that is enough to make the next attempt feel a little more possible. Dreams are one of the strangest ordinary things the brain does. Almost everyone dreams, even if the memory fades quickly after waking. A dream can be vivid, emotional, confusing, beautiful, frightening, funny, or so deeply odd that it seems to have been assembled by a committee of tired poets, anxious librarians, and one raccoon with a clipboard. Yet dreaming is not rare or mysterious in the sense of being abnormal. It is a normal feature of sleep, woven into the rhythms of the night. Dreams can happen in different stages of sleep. They're not limited to one single part of the night. People can report dreamlike experiences after waking from non-rapid eye movement sleep, especially lighter sleep. These dreams may be more thought-like, fragmented, or connected to recent concerns. But vivid, story-like, visually rich dreams are especially associated with rapid eye movement sleep. This is the stage where the dreaming brain can seem most theatrical, producing scenes, characters, emotions, and impossible events with remarkable confidence. Rapid eye movement sleep is a curious state. Brain activity becomes relatively active compared with deep, slow wave sleep. In some ways, parts of the brain look closer to waking than to quiet rest. The eyes move rapidly beneath the eyelids. Breathing and heart rate can become more irregular. Blood pressure and other automatic body signals may shift. At the same time, most voluntary muscles are placed into a state called muscle atonia, meaning they are temporarily inhibited. This helps keep the body still while the dream world becomes active. Muscle atonia is one of sleep's most practical ideas. Without it, A dream about running, swimming, arguing, flying, or dramatically escaping a talking wardrobe might become a serious problem for the bedside table. In healthy, rapid eye movement sleep, the brain can create movement and action internally while the body remains largely protected from acting those movements out. The mind may be sprinting through a castle made of soup, but the limbs usually stay sensibly under the blanket. Dreaming has been interpreted in many ways across history. Some cultures have treated dreams as messages, some have seen them as omens, some have used them as creative inspiration, emotional reflection, or spiritual experience. Modern science is more cautious. Dreams are not scientifically proven to contain simple hidden messages in the popular sense, where every object stands for one secret meaning. A falling tooth does not come with a universal translation card. A flying dream does not necessarily mean the brain is issuing a poetic weather report. But that does not mean dreams are meaningless. It means their meaning is not simple, fixed, or easy to decode. Dreams may reflect memory fragments, emotional concerns, recent experiences, older associations, bodily sensations, threat simulation, and spontaneous internal brain activity. They may combine pieces of waking life in strange ways, because the sleeping brain is not bound by the same logic, sensory input, or self-monitoring that shapes waking thought. One influential scientific idea came from Alan Hobson and Robert McCarley, who proposed the activation-synthesis hypothesis of dreaming. In broad terms, this hypothesis suggested that dreams may arise when the brain tries to make sense of internally generated activity during sleep, especially activity from brainstem systems during rapid eye movement sleep. The brain receives signals, activates memory and perception networks, and then attempts to synthesize them into experience. The result can feel like a story, even when its raw material is partly spontaneous and disorganized. The activation synthesis hypothesis was important because it moved dream science away from the idea that every dream must be a disguised message. It showed that dreaming could be studied as brain activity. Still, dream science has not settled on one complete explanation. Other theories emphasize memory processing, emotional regulation, threat rehearsal, social simulation, creativity, and the brain's attempts to integrate experience. Dreams may not have one single purpose. Like sleep itself, they may be doing several things at once. Rosalind Cartwright made important contributions to the study of dreaming and emotional processing. Her work explored how dreams may help people adapt to emotional experiences, including stress, grief, and major life changes. From this view, dreams are not just random images flickering across the mind. They may be part of how the brain works through emotional material, blending current concerns with older memories and feelings. A dream may not solve a problem neatly, but it may allow emotion to be revisited in a different form. Several brain regions help explain why dreams feel the way they do. The amygdala, a region involved in emotional salience and threat detection, can be active during rapid eye movement sleep. This may help explain why dreams can feel emotionally intense, even when their plots are absurd. The limbic system, which includes brain areas involved in emotion and motivation, also contributes to the strong feeling tone of dreams. Visual association areas help create dream imagery. These regions allow the brain to generate scenes, faces, places, and movement without ordinary visual input from the eyes. The sleeping brain can build a world from memory, imagination, and internal activity. That is why a person can see a childhood house, a mountain, a stranger, or a creature that has absolutely no business existing, all while lying in a dark room with closed eyes. The prefrontal cortex also matters. During many vivid dreams, parts of the prefrontal cortex involved in logic, self-monitoring, and critical evaluation may be less active than during waking life. This can help explain why dream logic feels so normal while the dream is happening. In a dream, a person may accept that they are late for an exam in a school they have not attended for 20 years, while also carrying a suitcase full of soup, and none of this raises any immediate concern. The usual inner fact-checker is working at reduced strength. Dreams may also draw from memory, but they rarely replay life exactly. They often mix recent events with older material. A person seen yesterday may appear in a place from childhood. A current worry may wear the costume of a completely unrelated scene. A feeling may remain even when the details make no sense. This blending suggests that dreams are part of the brain's wider overnight activity, where memory, emotion, perception, and imagination can interact without the strict rules of waking attention. Some dream theories also include threat simulation. This idea suggests that dreams may allow the brain to rehearse danger, conflict, escape, or social difficulty in a low-risk internal environment. Not every dream fits this idea, and many dreams are not threatening at all. But it may help explain why fear, pursuit, embarrassment, falling, and being unprepared are common dream themes. The sleeping brain may sometimes practice responses to uncertainty, even if it does so with the subtlety of a badly organized theatre troupe. Dreaming connects naturally to the larger work of sleep. The brain is not simply resting beneath the surface. It is reorganizing information, adjusting emotional weight, linking memories, testing associations, and generating internal experience. Dreams may be one visible edge of that hidden process. They are not random nonsense alone, and they are not perfect prophecy either, which is probably a relief for anyone who has dreamed about being chased by a talking wardrobe. The strange theatre of dreaming shows that rebuilding is not always quiet in the way people expect. Sometimes the sleeping brain repairs and sorts through waves, chemicals, and slow rhythms. Sometimes it does so through images, stories, feelings, and impossible rooms. The dream may vanish by morning, but the activity behind it belongs to the same nightly work, the brain changing itself in the dark, turning fragments of life into something it can carry into another day. Emotions do not simply happen in the heart, even though language often places them there. They are built through the brain, the body, memory, hormones, attention, and interpretation. A feeling is not just a mood floating through the mind. It is a whole biological event, shaped by what has happened, what the brain thinks it means, and what the body is preparing to do about it. Sleep helps regulate this emotional machinery. During waking life, emotional experiences can arrive with force. A sharp comment, a frightening moment, a disappointment, a conflict, a worry that keeps circling back, or even a happy surprise can leave the brain altered for hours. The event itself may pass quickly, but the feeling can remain. It may echo in attention, tighten the body, change decisions, or colour everything that happens afterward. The brain does not only remember what happened, it remembers how strongly it mattered. One key structure in this process is the amygdala. The amygdala is a small almond-shaped region deep in the brain involved in threat detection, emotional salience, and the rapid marking of events as important. It does not simply create fear, although fear is one of the emotions most closely associated with it. It helps the brain notice what may matter for survival, learning, and future action. A sudden sound, an angry face, a painful memory, or a possible danger can all involve amygdala activity. Another important region is the medial prefrontal cortex. This area helps with interpretation, regulation, and context. It can help calm emotional responses by placing them into a wider understanding. The amygdala may react quickly, But the medial prefrontal cortex helps ask whether the threat is real, whether it is still happening, and whether the response needs to remain so intense. In a well-rested brain, these regions can communicate more effectively. Emotion is still present, but it may be easier to guide. Poor sleep can disturb this balance. After too little sleep, emotional reactivity often increases. Small irritations can feel larger. Worry can become louder. Patience becomes thinner, sometimes thin enough to be officially classed as a biological lace curtain. Decisions may become more impulsive, and the tired brain may struggle to separate a genuine problem from a passing inconvenience. Anxiety sensitivity can also rise, meaning bodily sensations or uncertain situations may feel more alarming than they would after better rest. This does not mean lack of sleep creates every emotional difficulty, or that sleeping well solves all of them. Human emotion is much more complicated than that. But sleep helps set the conditions in which emotional regulation is easier. When sleep is disrupted, the brain may become more reactive and less able to apply careful interpretation. The emotional volume is turned up, while the thoughtful control panel becomes slightly harder to reach. Rapid eye movement sleep appears to play an important role in emotional processing. During rapid eye movement sleep, the brain is highly active, dreams can become vivid, and emotional memory networks may be engaged. At the same time, the chemical environment of the brain differs from waking life. Some stress-related arousal signals are reduced compared with ordinary alert wakefulness. This has led researchers to explore the idea that rapid eye movement sleep may help the brain process emotional memories in a state where the memory can be reactivated without the same full bodily stress response. In simple terms, sleep may help preserve the memory of an event while reducing some of its emotional sharpness. The brain does not necessarily erase what happened. It may keep the lesson, the context, and the meaning, while gradually lowering the intensity that clings to it. The memory remains, but it may grip attention less tightly. This is not guaranteed, and traumatic or highly stressful experiences can behave very differently. But for many ordinary emotional experiences, sleep may help transform raw feeling into something more manageable. Rosalind Cartwright's work on dreaming and emotional adaptation helped shape this area of thought. She studied how dreams may relate to emotional recovery, especially during periods of stress and personal change. Her research suggested that dreaming can sometimes help the mind integrate difficult feelings into memory and identity. Modern affective neuroscience, which studies emotion in the brain, has continued exploring how sleep influences mood, emotional memory, threat responses, and the regulation of stress. The limbic system is important here. This is a network of brain regions involved in emotion, motivation, memory, and bodily states. It includes structures such as the amygdala and hippocampus, and it works closely with areas of the prefrontal cortex. During sleep, especially dreaming sleep, parts of this emotional network can remain active. The brain may revisit emotionally charged material, not always as a direct replay, but as fragments, symbols, feelings, and altered scenes. Stress regulation also involves cortisol and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Cortisol is a hormone involved in alertness, metabolism, and the stress response. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is the communication system linking the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands. When the body faces stress, this system helps coordinate hormonal responses. Sleep and this stress system influence each other. Poor sleep can raise stress sensitivity, while stress can make sleep more fragile. It is a loop, and not always a polite one. Healthy sleep helps soften that loop. During the night, the brain and body move through changing patterns of nervous system activity, hormone release, memory processing, and emotional recalibration. The sympathetic nervous system, associated with readiness and action, can become less dominant during parts of sleep. Restorative regulation has more room to unfold. The emotional brain is not switched off, but it is given different conditions in which to work. This is why waking can sometimes change the shape of a feeling. A problem may not disappear, but it may seem less overwhelming. A painful moment may still matter, but it may no longer fill the whole mental room. A decision may become clearer, not because the universe kindly fixed everything overnight, but because the brain has had time to reduce noise, stabilize memory, and restore some regulatory control. Sleep rebuilds the emotional brain by changing the relationship between experience and reaction. It helps turn raw events into remembered events. It can soften the edge between what happened and how strongly it keeps pulling attention back. It does not erase pain, and it does not make the mind invincible. But night after night, when sleep is given the chance, the brain quietly works on making experience livable. It takes the sharp material of the day and begins, gently, to make it something the waking mind can carry. The brain is often described as the most complex object in the known universe, which is a bold title to carry while also occasionally forgetting why it entered the kitchen. It is busy, delicate, electrically active, chemically rich, and astonishingly demanding. Even at rest, it uses a large share of the body's energy. All that activity produces waste. Every working cell creates byproducts. Muscles do it. The liver does it. The brain does it too. When neurons communicate, when supporting cells maintain their environment, when energy is used and chemical signals are exchanged, the brain's internal world must be kept carefully balanced. Waste products need to be moved away. Nutrients need to circulate. The fluid around brain cells needs to remain suitable for clear signaling. The brain is not just thinking, it is also housekeeping. For a long time, one of the mysteries of brain biology was how this housekeeping worked. Most of the body uses the lymphatic system to help drain waste and maintain fluid balance. But the brain is protected inside the skull, surrounded by membranes, and separated from the bloodstream by the blood-brain barrier. It does not drain waste in exactly the same way as many other tissues. Then, in the early 21st century, researchers began describing a system that appeared to help solve part of the puzzle. This system is called the glymphatic system. The name combines glial cells with lymphatic because it involves brain support cells called glia and performs a waste clearance role with some similarity to the lymphatic system elsewhere in the body. Important work on the glymphatic system is associated with Maiken Nedergaard and the University of Rochester Research Group. Their studies, especially in animals, helped show that fluid movement through the brain may become more active during sleep. The fluid at the center of this story is cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid is a clear liquid that surrounds the brain and spinal cord. It helps cushion the nervous system, provides mechanical protection, carries nutrients and signaling molecules, and participates in the removal of waste products. It is not just watery padding. It is part of the brain's living environment, constantly being produced, circulated, and absorbed. During sleep, cerebrospinal fluid appears to move through brain tissue in ways that may help wash away certain waste products. The process is not like scrubbing a floor, and the brain does not have tiny overnight janitors with little mops, as useful as that would be for diagrams. Instead, fluid flows along spaces around blood vessels and through the tissue, interacting with the spaces between cells. Glial cells, especially astrocytes, help shape these fluid pathways. Astrocytes have tiny end feet that surround blood vessels and help regulate movement between blood, fluid, and brain tissue. One especially interesting finding from animal research is that the spaces around brain cells may expand during sleep. When these interstitial spaces become larger, fluid may move more easily through the brain. This could make waste clearance more efficient. In waking life, the brain is highly active and focused on processing the outside world. During sleep, when neural activity shifts and certain chemical conditions change, the brain may be able to open more room for this slow fluid movement. This idea is still an active area of research, especially when moving from animal studies to humans. Human brains are harder to study in this level of detail, partly because most people object, quite reasonably, to having their sleeping brains investigated too invasively. Scientists use brain imaging, spinal fluid studies, sleep recordings, and related methods to understand how these processes work in living people. The glymphatic system is a promising and important concept, but it should not be treated as a complete explanation for everything sleep does. Still, the larger principle is powerful. Sleep may help maintain the chemical environment the brain needs. Neurons are sensitive. They depend on precise concentrations of ions, neurotransmitters, oxygen, glucose, and other molecules. If the environment around them becomes disrupted, communication suffers. The brain's ability to think, remember, regulate emotion, and coordinate the body depends on this hidden chemical order. Two proteins often discussed in this context are beta-amyloid and tau. Beta-amyloid can form sticky plaques between brain cells when it accumulates abnormally. Tau is normally involved in stabilizing structures inside neurons, but in Alzheimer's disease it can become abnormal and form tangles inside cells. These proteins are strongly associated with Alzheimer's disease, although the disease itself is complex and involves many interacting processes, including genetics, inflammation, blood vessel health, metabolism, aging, and other factors. Research suggests that sleep and waste clearance may influence how proteins such as beta-amyloid are handled by the brain. Some studies have found links between poor sleep, disrupted slow-wave sleep, and changes in markers related to Alzheimer's disease risk. But it is important to be careful. Sleep alone does not prevent Alzheimer's disease. A person can sleep well and still develop neurodegenerative illness, while many risk factors are outside simple personal control. Good sleep is one piece of brain health, not a magic shield. The National Institute on Aging supports research into aging, dementia, sleep, and brain health. The Alzheimer's Association also highlights the importance of understanding sleep as part of the wider picture of cognitive health and neurodegenerative disease. These organizations are connected to a field that is still developing. Scientists are trying to understand not only whether poor sleep contributes to risk, but how sleep disruption, brain changes, aging, and disease processes may influence each other over many years. The relationship can run both ways. Poor sleep may place stress on the brain's maintenance systems, but changes in the aging or diseased brain may also make sleep worse. Someone with neurodegenerative disease may experience fragmented sleep, altered rhythms, or changes in deep sleep. The cause and effect can become tangled, like cables in a drawer that were definitely organized once, perhaps in another lifetime. This is why the nightly cleaning system should be understood with both curiosity and caution. It is one of the most fascinating areas of sleep science because it gives sleep a physical, almost visible purpose. The brain is not only sorting memories or softening emotions, it may also be changing fluid movement, adjusting the spaces around cells, and helping clear away byproducts of daily neural work. The image is gentle but profound. While awareness fades, while the body rests, while dreams come and go, cerebrospinal fluid may be moving through the sleeping brain. The night becomes a maintenance window, waste products are carried away, chemical balance is protected. The environment around neurons is refreshed enough for another day of signaling, learning, feeling, and decision-making. Sleep rebuilds the brain partly by giving it time to clean itself, Not with dusters and buckets, but with fluid, glial cells, blood vessels, slow rhythms, and carefully shifted biology. It is housekeeping with less dusting and more cerebrospinal fluid. Quiet, hidden, and essential, it helps preserve the conditions that allow the brain to wake and begin again. The brain is not fixed like a sculpture. It is alive, responsive, and constantly changing. Every experience leaves some kind of trace, even if the trace is tiny and temporary. A sound, a movement, a thought, a conversation, a mistake, a new skill, or a sudden memory can all alter the way neurons communicate. The brain is rebuilt not only through rest, but through change. One of the most important names for this change is synaptic plasticity. Synaptic plasticity is the ability of connections between neurons to become stronger, weaker, more efficient, or less prominent depending on experience. A neuron communicates with other neurons through specialized contact points called synapses. At these synapses, chemical messengers called neurotransmitters help signals pass from one cell to another. The receiving parts of neurons often include branching structures called dendrites, which gather incoming signals and help determine whether a neuron becomes active. This means thoughts and memories are not floating separately from the physical brain. They depend on living networks. When a skill is practiced, when a fact is learned, when a place becomes familiar, or when an emotional experience makes a strong impression, patterns of activity move through neural networks. Some synapses become more likely to pass signals again. Some pathways become smoother. Some connections may strengthen because they are used repeatedly. Others may weaken because they are less useful or less active. During waking life, this is necessary. The brain has to adapt to the world. It must learn what matters, what is safe, what is dangerous, what is familiar, what is surprising, and what can be ignored. A brain that could not change would be unable to learn, but a brain that only strengthened connections hour after hour without any balancing process would face a different problem. It would become noisy, expensive, and overloaded. This is where sleep may play one of its quietest and most elegant roles. The synaptic homeostasis hypothesis, associated with Giulio Tononi and Chiara Sorelli, proposes that waking life tends to increase the strength of many synapses as the brain learns and responds, while sleep helps rebalance those connections. In this view, sleep allows the brain to scale back some synaptic strength, especially in weaker or less important connections, while preserving patterns that matter. The word homeostasis means balance. The idea is not that sleep wipes the brain clean. It is not an overnight memory bonfire with the brain cheerfully tossing in passwords, birthdays, and the location of the car keys. Instead, sleep may help restore balance after a day of learning. The brain can keep important patterns usable while reducing unnecessary strength across networks. It is a way of protecting both memory and efficiency. This matters because synapses are metabolically costly. Stronger connections require energy and materials to maintain. The brain already uses a large share of the body's energy, even though it makes up only a small part of body weight. If waking experience strengthened too many connections without limit, the system could become harder to manage. Signals might interfere with one another. Neural networks might become less selective. The brain's internal conversation could become too loud. Sleep may help turn down some of that volume. During slow-wave sleep, large patterns of coordinated activity move across the cortex. These rhythms may help the brain adjust synaptic strength in a broad and organized way. The effect is not like deleting the day. It is more like tidying a very busy desk after hours of work. The important papers remain. The notes that matter are kept. But the empty mugs, loose crumbs, and 17 identical reminders to do the same task can finally be cleared away. A garden is another useful comparison, as long as the science stays in view. Learning during the day is a little like growth. New shoots appear. Some pathways become stronger. Some patterns spread quickly because the brain has used them again and again. But healthy growth also requires pruning. A garden that only grew and never trimmed itself would soon become tangled. Sleep may help the brain prune and rebalance, not by destroying the garden, but by allowing its structure to remain useful. This does not mean scientists have solved every detail. The synaptic homeostasis hypothesis is a major theory, not the only explanation for sleep. Other theories emphasize memory consolidation, emotional processing, waste clearance, immune regulation, and energy restoration. These ideas do not have to cancel one another out. Sleep is likely doing many things at once. The brain is not a simple machine with one overnight maintenance button. It is more like a living city, where cleaning, repairs, traffic control, filing, and quiet renovation can happen at the same time. The important point is that sleep helps the brain manage change. Waking life writes heavily onto neural networks. Sleep may help decide how strongly those changes should remain. A new skill may need stabilizing. A frightening moment may need softening. A useful fact may need linking to older knowledge. A passing distraction may be allowed to fade. The sleeping brain is not adding information endlessly. It is also balancing the system that makes information usable. Dendrites, synapses, neurotransmitters, and neural networks all belong to this hidden rebuilding. Dendrites receive signals. Synapses shape communication. Neurotransmitters carry chemical messages. Networks allow patterns to become perception, movement, memory, emotion, and thought. When these systems are tuned well, the brain can respond clearly. When they are overloaded or poorly regulated, thinking can feel foggy, reactive, or scattered. This is one reason poor sleep can leave the mind feeling cluttered. After too little sleep, the brain may still contain the traces of waking life, but they may not be well organized. Attention becomes harder to hold. Emotional reactions become louder. Memory feels less reliable. The system has not had enough time to rebalance its connections and reduce unnecessary strain. It is not simply tired, it is crowded. A good night of sleep does not produce a perfect mind by morning. It does not remove every worry or make every memory crisp, but it may help the brain begin the day with networks that are a little more efficient, a little less noisy, and a little better prepared to learn again. That is a subtle kind of repair, but it is repair all the same. Sleep rebuilds the brain partly by tuning its connections. It helps keep learning from becoming overload. It allows the nervous system to strengthen what matters, soften what does not, and reduce the metabolic cost of carrying too much unnecessary signal. While the body rests, the brain quietly tends its own networks, trimming, balancing, and preparing the living circuitry of thought for another day. The sleeping brain is not shaped only by electrical rhythms. It is also shaped by chemistry. Every state of mind has its own chemical weather. Wakefulness, drowsiness, deep sleep, dreaming, focus, calm, fear, motivation, and attention all depend partly on the changing levels of chemical messengers in the brain. These messengers do not create consciousness by themselves, but they help set the conditions in which different kinds of brain activity become more or less likely. They influence whether the brain is alert or relaxed, restless or steady, outward-facing or turned inward. Two broad kinds of chemical messengers are especially important here: neurotransmitters and neuromodulators. Neurotransmitters help neurons communicate across synapses, the tiny spaces where one nerve cell sends a signal to another. Neuromodulators often work more broadly, adjusting the activity of whole networks, rather than carrying one simple message from one cell to the next. In real biology, the categories can overlap, because the brain is rarely interested in being tidy for the benefit of textbooks. During waking life, several chemical systems help keep the brain alert and responsive. Norepinephrine, which is closely related to the body's arousal and stress systems, supports attention, vigilance, and readiness to react. Serotonin helps shape mood, arousal, pain sensitivity, and many other functions. Dopamine is involved in motivation, reward, movement, attention, and learning. Acetylcholine plays important roles in attention, memory, learning, and rapid eye movement sleep. Together, these systems help create the alert, active brain that can notice the world and respond to it. But sleep requires a different chemical balance. The brain cannot simply stay in its daytime chemical state and hope sleep will politely arrive anyway. To fall asleep and move through the stages of the night, arousal systems must shift. Some wake-promoting signals become quieter. Other inhibitory systems become more influential. The brain changes not only what it is doing, but the internal chemical environment in which it is doing it. One of the most important calming chemical messengers is gamma-aminobutyric acid. Gamma-aminobutyric acid is a major inhibitory neurotransmitter, which means it often reduces the activity of neurons rather than exciting them. This does not make it dull or unimportant. Inhibition is essential. Without inhibition, the brain would be chaos. Too much firing, too much noise, too little control. Gamma-aminobutyric acid helps quiet neural activity in many contexts, including the systems that allow sleep to begin and remain stable. In parts of the brain involved in sleep regulation, gamma-aminobutyric acid helps reduce the activity of wake-promoting circuits. This is one reason falling asleep can feel like a lowering of internal volume. The alert brain is not simply defeated by tiredness, it is actively guided into a different state. Certain neurons become less active. Certain signals are dampened. The whole system begins to lean away from the bright, responsive chemistry of waking life. Orexin is another crucial part of this story. Orexin, also called hypocretin, is a wakefulness-stabilizing neuropeptide. A neuropeptide is a small protein-like molecule used by neurons to communicate and influence activity. Orexin helps keep the brain awake and prevents sudden, unwanted switches between sleep and wakefulness. It is not merely a chemical that makes a person alert, it helps stabilize the boundary between states. When orexin signaling is disrupted, that boundary can become unstable. This is closely linked to narcolepsy, a neurological sleep disorder that can involve excessive daytime sleepiness, sudden sleep attacks, disrupted nighttime sleep, and in some cases cataplexy, where strong emotion triggers sudden muscle weakness. Narcolepsy shows how delicate the chemistry of sleep and wakefulness really is. The problem is not simply being tired, it is a disruption in the systems that help the brain maintain the right state at the right time. Major discoveries involving orexin and narcolepsy are associated with Masashi Yanagisawa and Emmanuel Mignot. Yanagisawa and colleagues helped identify orexin in the late 1990s. Mignot and colleagues helped show the connection between hypocretin signaling and narcolepsy. Their work revealed that wakefulness is not just the absence of sleep. It is an actively maintained biological condition, supported by specific chemical systems. The chemistry of sleep also changes between non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep. These are not just different depth of unconsciousness, they are chemically distinct states. In non-rapid eye movement sleep, especially deeper sleep, many wake-promoting systems are quieter. Brain activity slows and becomes more synchronized. The body tends toward calmer rhythms. This chemical setting helps support slow waves, reduced responsiveness, and certain kinds of restoration. Rapid eye movement sleep has a different profile. Acetylcholine becomes relatively active, while norepinephrine and serotonin activity are much lower than in waking life. This helps explain why rapid eye movement sleep can feel so strange. The brain can be highly active, vivid, emotional, and dream-filled. Yet the body remains mostly still, and the mind lacks the stable self-monitoring of wakefulness. It is not ordinary consciousness, and it is not deep stillness. It is a third kind of state, chemically and electrically distinct. This is one of the reasons the brain can be unconscious in different ways. Deep, non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep both remove ordinary waking awareness, but they do not do it by creating the same internal conditions. Deep sleep is slow, synchronized, and hard to wake from. Rapid eye movement sleep is active, vivid, and dreamlike. The difference is partly written in brain waves, but also in chemistry. These chemical shifts are part of the rebuilding process. Memory consolidation, emotional regulation, sensory filtering, synaptic tuning, and dreaming all depend on the brain entering the right state. The brain cannot perform every kind of maintenance in one chemical setting. It needs changing conditions. It needs periods of quiet inhibition, periods of slow coordination, periods of vivid internal activity, and periods where stress-related arousal is reduced. This also explains why sleep can be fragile. Stress, caffeine, alcohol, illness, medication, irregular schedules, and light exposure can all alter the chemical landscape of the brain. Sometimes they make it harder to fall asleep. Sometimes they change the balance of sleep stages. Sometimes they allow sleep to happen, but make it less smooth or less restorative. The body may be in bed, the eyes may be closed, and yet the internal weather may not be ideal. Sleep is therefore not merely the result of being tired enough. It is a carefully regulated shift in brain chemistry. Serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, acetylcholine, gamma-aminobutyric acid, orexin, and many other messengers help guide the brain through the night. They help determine when alertness fades, when dreams become vivid, when muscles stay still, when memories are processed, and when the mind can safely let go of the outside world. The sleeping brain rebuilds itself by changing its internal conditions. It does not just close its eyes and hope for the best. It adjusts the chemistry of attention, emotion, movement, memory, and arousal. Beneath the quiet surface of sleep, the brain's chemical weather keeps shifting, gently carrying the mind through darkness, restoration, dreams, and finally back toward waking. The brain may sit inside the skull, but it does not live a private life. It is connected to the rest of the body through blood, nerves, hormones, immune signals, temperature rhythms, appetite signals, and stress chemistry. Sleep rebuilds the brain partly because it helps rebuild the conditions around the brain. A tired nervous system is never only a tired nervous system. It belongs to a body that also needs timing, fuel, repair, and balance. Hormones are central to this wider nightly work. They are chemical messengers released by glands and tissues, travelling through the bloodstream to influence organs, cells, and brain regions. They help regulate growth, metabolism, hunger, stress, reproduction, body temperature, inflammation, and daily rhythms. The endocrine system is the body's hormone signaling network, and it works closely with the nervous system. Sleep changes this network, and this network changes sleep. One important hormone is cortisol. Cortisol is often described as a stress hormone, which is true but incomplete. It is involved in the stress response, but it also helps regulate energy, inflammation, blood pressure, and alertness. In a typical daily rhythm, cortisol is usually lower during the early part of sleep and rises toward morning. That morning rise helps prepare the body for wakefulness. It is part of the body quietly opening the curtains before consciousness fully arrives. This rhythm is influenced by the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the communication system linking the hypothalamus in the brain, the pituitary gland beneath it, and the adrenal glands above the kidneys. When the body faces stress, this axis helps coordinate cortisol release. Sleep and the stress system affect each other. Poor sleep can make stress responses more reactive, and stress can make sleep shallower, shorter, or harder to begin. It is a very committed partnership, though not always a helpful one. Sleep also affects metabolic regulation. Metabolism is the set of chemical processes that allow the body to use, store, and manage energy. One key part of this is glucose regulation. Glucose is a major fuel for the body and brain. Insulin is a hormone that helps move glucose from the bloodstream into cells where it can be used or stored. Insulin sensitivity describes how responsive the body's cells are to insulin. When insulin sensitivity is better, the body can manage blood glucose more efficiently. When it is reduced, the body has to work harder to keep glucose in a healthy range. Poor sleep can affect this system. Even short periods of sleep restriction may reduce insulin sensitivity and make glucose regulation less efficient. This does not mean one bad night permanently damages metabolism. Bodies are resilient, and ordinary life includes imperfect nights. But repeated sleep disruption can make energy regulation harder. The brain then wakes into a body whose fuel systems are less smoothly balanced, which is not ideal for attention, mood, or decision-making. Appetite is also shaped by sleep. Two hormones often discussed here are leptin and ghrelin. Leptin is involved in signaling fullness and energy stores. Ghrelin is involved in hunger. When sleep is restricted, appetite regulation can shift, and some studies have found changes that may increase hunger or food cravings, especially for energy-dense foods. This does not mean a single short night decides long-term body weight, because body weight is shaped by many factors, including genetics, food environment, activity, health, medication, stress, income, culture, and chance. But sleep is one influence on the appetite system, and it can gently or not so gently tilt the body towards seeking more energy. This makes sense from an evolutionary point of view. If the body is awake for longer, it may interpret that longer waking period as a greater demand for fuel. Unfortunately, modern life has added supermarkets, delivery apps, biscuit cupboards, and the mysterious late-night confidence that tomorrow's person will deal with today's snack decisions. The biology is ancient, the snack drawer is not. The autonomic nervous system also helps link sleep, brain state, and body regulation. This system controls many automatic functions, including heart rate, digestion, blood vessel tone, breathing patterns, and sweating. It includes the sympathetic branch, which supports action and alertness, and the parasympathetic branch, which supports calmer restorative processes. During healthy sleep, especially deeper non-rapid eye movement sleep, sympathetic activity often decreases while more restorative patterns become stronger. The body is not frozen, but it is shifted away from the chemistry of effort. This matters for rebuilding because the brain depends on bodily stability. Neurons need oxygen, glucose, steady blood, flow, balanced hormones, and regulated inflammation. If sleep helps calm stress chemistry, support glucose control, coordinate appetite signals, and stabilize automatic body rhythms, it is also helping create a better environment for the brain itself. The brain cannot float politely inside the skull, as if the rest of the body is merely a carrying case. It is part of the whole system. Immune coordination belongs here too. Sleep helps regulate inflammatory signals and immune activity. Hormones such as cortisol interact with immune function, because cortisol can influence inflammation. Too much stress chemistry at the wrong time, or too little restorative sleep, can disturb the balance between defense and overreaction. The body needs immune readiness, but it also needs restraint. A useful immune system is not one that shouts constantly. It is one that responds appropriately. Public health organizations recognize sleep as part of health, not just comfort. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention describes insufficient sleep as a public health concern. The World Health Organization also recognizes sleep as connected to health and well-being. This does not make sleep a cure for every problem, and it should never be treated as a moral test. But it does place sleep where it belongs, among the basic biological supports that help human bodies function. The sleeping body is therefore not idle. Hormones shift, stress systems recalibrate, appetite signals change, glucose regulation is influenced, the autonomic nervous system settles into different patterns, immune communication continues. The brain participates in all of this and benefits from all of it. Sleep rebuilds the brain because the brain is not separate from the body's nightly restoration. It thinks, remembers, dreams and feels inside a living chemical environment. When sleep is steady and well-timed, that environment becomes more supportive. The body adjusts its rhythms around the quiet brain, and the brain, in turn, wakes better prepared to guide the body through another day. Sleep and immunity are deeply connected. The immune system is often imagined as a kind of inner army, always ready to fight invaders. That image can be useful, but it is also incomplete. The immune system is not only a fighter, it is a communicator, a repair crew, a surveillance network, and sometimes a very intense committee meeting about whether a tiny problem requires a dramatic response. It helps detect infection, heal damage, regulate inflammation, and coordinate with the brain and body. Sleep is part of that coordination. It influences how the immune system responds to infection, how inflammation is regulated, how the body recovers from illness, and even how strongly the body may respond to vaccination. This does not mean sleep is a cure-all, or that a good night's sleep can replace medicine, vaccines, nutrition, or proper medical care. But it does mean sleep helps create the biological conditions in which defense and repair can work more effectively. One important set of messengers in this relationship is called cytokines. Cytokines are signaling molecules used by immune cells and other cells to communicate. They can influence inflammation, fever, infection response, healing, and the way the immune system coordinates its activity. Some cytokines can also affect the brain, changing sleepiness, energy, mood, and motivation. This is one reason illness often brings that heavy, unmistakable desire to lie down and sleep. When a person becomes ill, the body is not being lazy. It is reallocating resources. Fighting infection takes energy. Fever, inflammation, immune cell activity, antibody production, and tissue repair all require coordination and fuel. The brain receives signals from the immune system and adjusts behavior accordingly. Appetite may change, movement may feel harder, the desire for sleep may increase. This sickness behavior can feel unpleasant, but it is part of the body's attempt to focus energy where it is needed most. Sleep can support immune function in several ways. During sleep, especially deeper sleep, the body shifts into a state that can support certain immune processes. Inflammatory signals may be regulated, immune memory may be shaped, recovery processes may become more efficient. Some research suggests that sleep before and after vaccination can influence the strength of antibody responses, although the details vary depending on the vaccine, the person, and the study. The general principle is that the immune system learns, adapts, and remembers, and sleep appears to support that learning in the body's defensive networks. Inflammation is a key part of this story. Inflammation is not automatically bad. It is a normal protective response that helps the body deal with injury or infection. The problem comes when inflammation is too strong, poorly timed, or long-lasting. chronic sleep disruption can be linked with increased inflammatory markers and poorer immune regulation. The body needs enough immune response to protect itself, but not so much that the defense system begins creating unnecessary damage. Sleep helps with that balance. The brain has its own special relationship with immunity. For a long time, the brain was described as immune privileged, meaning it was partly protected from the ordinary immune activity seen in many other tissues. That protection is real, but the modern picture is more nuanced. The brain communicates with the immune system, responds to inflammation, and contains specialized cells that help maintain its environment. Among the most important of these cells are microglia. Microglia are immune like cells in the brain and spinal cord. They monitor the neural environment, respond to injury or infection, clear debris, and help shape inflammation. They also play roles in development and synaptic pruning, where less useful neural connections can be removed or refined. Microglia are not merely guards standing at the edge of the brain. They're active caretakers of the nervous system. When the brain is healthy, microglia help maintain order. When they become overactive or dysregulated, they may contribute to harmful inflammation. This is one reason sleep matters. Sleep disruption can influence inflammatory signaling, stress chemistry, and brain immune activity. The exact pathways are complex, and researchers are still studying them, but the central idea is clear. The sleeping brain is connected to the immune state of the body. Another protective structure is the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is a specialized interface between the bloodstream and the brain. It helps regulate what can pass from blood into brain tissue. This is vital because the brain needs a carefully controlled chemical environment. Nutrients, oxygen, hormones, immune signals, and waste products must be managed with precision. The blood-brain barrier does not seal the brain away completely, but it filters and regulates access, helping protect delicate neural circuits. During infection, inflammation, aging, or disease, communication across this barrier can change. Immune signals from the body can affect the brain, and brain inflammation can influence behavior, mood, and sleep. This is why feeling ill is not only a matter of a sore throat or aching muscles. The brain itself receives the message that something is happening, and it changes the whole experience of being awake. The National Institutes of Health supports research into sleep, immunity, inflammation, and recovery, helping scientists understand how these systems interact. Sleep immunology is still developing, and it is easy to oversimplify. The immune system is not one switch, and sleep is not one medicine. There are many immune cells, many cytokines, many stages of sleep, and many kinds of illness, but the evidence points toward a close partnership between sleep and immune regulation. This partnership also explains why poor sleep during stressful or unhealthy periods can feel so draining. The body may be trying to repair, defend, regulate, and think clearly all at once, while missing part of the rhythm that helps organize those tasks. It is rather like asking a night crew to clean, restock, repair the wiring, answer emails, and make soup, all while the lights keep flickering. Sleep supports the body's defensive systems by giving them time and conditions to coordinate. It helps regulate inflammation, supports immune memory, allows sickness responses to conserve energy, and helps maintain the protected environment of the brain. Microglia keep watch. Cytokines carry messages. The blood-brain barrier filters the traffic. The sleeping body shifts toward repair. So sleep rebuilds the brain partly by helping defend it, not by locking it away from the body, but by placing it within a regulated, responsive, protected system. While the mind rests, immunity continues its quiet work, helping the brain remain clean, enough, calm enough, and guarded enough to wake ready for the world again. The value of sleep becomes especially clear when it is missing. At first, sleep loss can seem manageable. A person may feel a little slower, a little less patient, perhaps more interested in coffee than usual. The brain can compensate for a while. It can lean harder on motivation, habit, and effort. But as sleep deprivation deepens, the effects spread through attention, reaction time, working memory, emotional control, judgment, and learning. The mind may still be awake, but it is not operating with the same steadiness. Sleep deprivation means the brain has been denied some of the time it normally uses for restoration, memory processing, chemical recalibration, and emotional regulation. It can happen after one very short night, after being awake too long, or after many nights of restricted sleep. Chronic sleep restriction can be especially sneaky because people often adapt to feeling tired. The tired state becomes normal, even while performance quietly declines. The brain, unfortunately, is not always the best witness to its own impairment. Attention is one of the first systems to suffer. A rested brain can hold focus, notice changes, and shift attention when needed. A sleep-deprived brain becomes less consistent. It may perform well for a moment, then suddenly dip. This is why tiredness does not always feel like a smooth decline. It can come in waves. 1 minute a person is following a conversation or reading a sentence. The next, the mind has wandered off into a foggy little side room and forgotten to leave a forwarding address. Reaction time also slows. This matters because many ordinary tasks depend on quick responses. Driving, crossing a road, operating machinery, cooking, caring for others, and making decisions under pressure all require the brain to notice and respond. When sleep pressure is high, the brain may take longer to detect a signal, longer to interpret it, and longer to act. A fraction of a second can matter in the real world. Working memory becomes weaker too. Working memory is the ability to hold and use information briefly, such as remembering the beginning of a sentence while listening to the end, keeping track of directions, doing mental arithmetic, or comparing choices. When sleep is short, the brain may struggle to keep information active. Thoughts become harder to organize. A simple task can feel strangely crowded, as if the mind has too many open tabs and several of them are playing music. Emotional control is also affected. Poor sleep can make the amygdala more reactive and the prefrontal cortex less effective at regulation. The prefrontal cortex, especially its front regions, is important for planning, impulse control, flexible decision-making, and weighing consequences. When this system is under-rested, emotions can become louder and judgment less stable. Irritation rises more quickly. Anxiety may feel sharper. Small setbacks can feel oddly personal, as though the universe has developed a specific grudge about printer settings. Judgment and risk assessment can become distorted as well. A tired brain may underestimate danger, overvalue immediate rewards, or fail to notice subtle problems. This is especially concerning because the person may not feel as impaired as they are. Sleep deprivation can reduce insight into performance. In other words, the tired brain may confidently announce that everything is fine, while quietly misplacing reaction time, patience, and common sense behind the sofa. Microsleep show how serious this can become. A microsleep is a brief, involuntary lapse into sleep that can last for a few seconds or even less. The eyes may close or they may remain open while awareness briefly drops out. The person may not realize it has happened. In a safe chair, this might simply look like nodding off. Behind the wheel of a car on a night shift or in a high-risk workplace, it can be dangerous. A few seconds of lost awareness can carry real consequences. Research by David Dingus has been especially important in understanding sleep restriction, vigilance, and performance lapses. Vigilance means the ability to maintain attention over time. especially when waiting for signals or monitoring a task. Studies of restricted sleep show that people can develop repeated lapses in attention, slower responses, and reduced accuracy. These lapses may become more common across days of limited sleep, even when people think they are adapting. NASA fatigue research has also explored how sleep loss and circadian disruption affect performance, especially in demanding environments where mistakes matter. Aviation, spaceflight, medicine, transport, and shift work all depend on alertness. Transportation safety research has repeatedly shown that fatigue can impair driving and increase accident risk. The issue is not simply feeling sleepy. It is the combination of slower reaction time, reduced vigilance, poorer judgment, and sudden lapses in awareness. This is why tired driving can be so dangerous. Driving looks routine, especially on familiar roads, but it is a complex task. The brain must monitor speed, lane position, road signs, other vehicles, pedestrians, weather, distance, and unexpected changes. It must predict movement and make fast adjustments. A sleep-deprived brain may still keep the car moving, but its safety margin is thinner. The danger increases further when the road is monotonous, the lighting is low, or the body's circadian rhythm is pushing strongly towards sleep. Learning capacity also suffers. Sleep helps stabilize memories and refine skills. Without enough sleep, new information may not be encoded well in the first place, and what is learned may be less effectively consolidated later. A tired student, worker, artist, athlete, or musician may keep practicing, but the brain is less prepared to absorb and organize the effort. More time awake does not always mean more progress. Sometimes it simply means more tired attempts. Sleep loss reveals what sleep normally protects. When the maintenance window is shortened or disrupted, the effects become visible in attention, emotion, memory, choice, and safety. The brain becomes noisier, less stable, and less efficient. It may still function, but it does so with fewer reserves. This does not mean every poor night is a disaster. Human beings are resilient, and imperfect sleep is part of life. But repeated sleep loss slowly removes one of the brain's essential forms of care. Sleep is when the nervous system can reset its chemistry, tune its networks, process experience, and prepare for another stretch of waking life. The tired brain shows why rebuilding matters. Without enough sleep, the mind does not simply feel sleepy. It becomes less able to notice clearly, decide wisely, react quickly, learn efficiently, and regulate emotion. Sleep is not an optional pause from intelligence. It is one of the quiet conditions that allows intelligence to return. Sleep changes as the brain changes. A newborn, a child, a teenager, an adult, and an older person do not sleep in exactly the same way because they are not carrying the same brain through the night. The nervous system develops, learns, matures, adapts, ages, and responds to health, hormones, environment, stress, and routine. Sleep follows that change in biology. It is not one fixed pattern issued at birth and politely kept forever. It is a moving rhythm across a lifetime. In infancy, sleep is spread across the day and night. Newborn babies sleep a great deal overall, but not in one smooth overnight block. Their sleep is distributed in shorter periods because their circadian rhythms are still developing and their feeding needs are frequent. To a very tired parent, this may feel less like a biological rhythm and more like a tiny household manager with no respect for clocks. But from the infant's point of view, the pattern makes sense. The brain is growing rapidly, the body is developing, and sleep is part of that enormous early construction project. Infant sleep also has a different architecture from adult sleep. Babies spend a large proportion of sleep in active sleep, which is an early form related to rapid eye movement sleep. This may support brain development, sensory system maturation, and the shaping of neural circuits. The infant brain is not merely resting, it is building. Connections are forming at remarkable speed. Experiences are beginning to leave traces. The sleeping brain is helping organize a nervous system that is still learning how to live in the world. As childhood continues, sleep gradually becomes more consolidated. The long-scattered sleep of early life begins to gather more strongly into nighttime rest, with daytime naps decreasing for many children. Deep sleep becomes especially prominent in childhood. This makes sense because children are learning constantly. Language, movement, social rules, emotional, control, spatial understanding, school knowledge, and basic habits are all being shaped. The brain is absorbing the world at a rate that would make most adults request a quiet room and perhaps a biscuit. During childhood, sleep supports growth, memory consolidation, immune function, attention, and behavior. Children who do not get enough sleep may struggle with emotional regulation, learning, and impulse control. Sleepiness in children does not always look like calm drowsiness. It can sometimes appear as restlessness, irritability, or difficulty focusing. The tired brain does not always politely announce that it is tired. Sometimes it runs around making the message everyone else's problem. Then adolescence arrives, and sleep timing often shifts later. Teenagers are frequently accused of simply choosing to stay up late, and sometimes choices do matter, especially with phones, games, messages, homework, and social life all competing for the evening. But biology is also involved. During adolescence, the circadian rhythm often shifts toward a later schedule. Melatonin release may occur later in the evening, and the pressure to fall asleep can arrive later than it did in childhood. This means many teenagers are biologically inclined to sleep later and wake later. Yet school schedules often demand early rising. The result can be a chronic mismatch between the teenage brain's internal clock and the outside world's timetable. Social pressure, academic demands, artificial light, and technology can make this mismatch worse, but the underlying shift is not imaginary. It is part of adolescent development. A teenager sleeping late is not always evidence of moral collapse. Sometimes it is a circadian rhythm being dragged into a morning it did not vote for. Sleep remains crucial during adolescence because the brain is still developing, especially regions involved in planning, emotional regulation, reward sensitivity, and decision-making. The prefrontal cortex continues maturing into young adulthood. Learning demands are high, social experiences are intense, and emotional life can be vivid. Sleep helps support memory, mood, attention, and the regulation of impulsive behavior. When sleep is shortened, the developing brain has less time for the maintenance and consolidation it needs. In adulthood, sleep often becomes more stable, though life may become less cooperative. Work, caregiving, stress, illness, parenting, travel, shift schedules, and the general administration of being a person can all interfere. Adult sleep needs vary, but major scientific bodies such as the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the Sleep Research Society have issued recommendations for healthy sleep duration. For most adults, they recommend at least 7 hours of sleep per night on a regular basis. This is not because 7 hours is a magic number for everyone, but because too little sleep is associated with poorer health, alertness, and functioning. Adult sleep architecture includes cycles of non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep, with more deep sleep often occurring earlier in the night and more rapid eye movement sleep later. But the balance can shift depending on age, stress, alcohol, medication, sleep disorders, and routine. The adult brain continues to rely on sleep for memory consolidation, emotional regulation, metabolic balance, immune support, and synaptic tuning. It may not be growing like an infant brain or reorganizing like an adolescent brain, but it is still changing every day. Older adulthood brings another set of changes. Deep slow-wave sleep tends to decline with age. Sleep may become lighter and more fragmented. Awakenings during the night may become more common. Circadian rhythms can shift earlier for some people, creating earlier sleepiness in the evening and earlier waking in the morning. Medical conditions, pain, medications, reduced light exposure, less physical activity, and sleep disorders such as sleep apnea can also affect sleep quality. These changes do not mean older adults need sleep less in any simple sense. Aging does not make sleep unimportant. It may make sleep harder to maintain. That distinction matters. If an older person sleeps less deeply or wakes more often, it does not mean the brain has stopped needing restoration. Memory, mood, immune regulation, cardiovascular health, and attention still depend on sleep. The maintenance system remains necessary, even when the night becomes more fragile. Sleep across a lifetime is therefore a record of changing needs. The infant brain sleeps while building its first networks. The child's brain sleeps while learning the structure of the world. The adolescent brain sleeps while reshaping timing, emotion, and control. The adult brain sleeps while preserving function under the pressure of daily life. The older brain sleeps while maintaining resilience, memory, health, and stability in a body that may require more careful support. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the Sleep Research Society help define standards, recommendations, and clinical understanding, but the deeper story is written in biology itself. Sleep is never separate from development, hormones, learning demands, aging, or health. It changes because the brain changes. Across every stage of life, sleep remains part of rebuilding. The work differs, but the need continues. The night adapts to the person moving through it, offering the developing brain, the learning brain, the tired brain, and the aging brain a chance to recalibrate in darkness. From infancy to old age, sleep is not a pause outside life. It is one of the quiet ways life keeps remaking itself. Sleep can seem simple when it is working well. The room darkens, the body settles, awareness fades, and morning eventually arrives. But when sleep begins to break down, it reveals how delicate the whole system really is. Rest depends on timing, breathing, chemistry, movement, memory, emotion, temperature, hormones, and the careful cycling of brain states. Many things have to coordinate quietly for sleep to feel effortless. Sleep disorders show what happens when that coordination is disturbed. They are not just inconveniences or signs that someone is not trying hard enough to rest. They are medical and neurological conditions that can affect the quality, timing, continuity, and structure of sleep. A person may spend enough hours in bed and still wake exhausted. The problem may not be laziness, poor discipline, or a tragic lack of herbal tea. It may be that the machinery of sleep is being interrupted. Insomnia is one of the most familiar sleep disorders. It involves difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, waking too early, or feeling that sleep is not restorative. Insomnia is often linked with arousal systems that remain too active at the wrong time. Stress, worry, pain, irregular routines, medications, mental health conditions, and learned associations can all play a role. Over time, the bed itself can become connected with frustration and alertness rather than rest. The brain begins to treat bedtime not as a cue for sleep, but as the opening ceremony for a long internal debate. This is why insomnia is not simply solved by telling someone to relax. Relaxation helps some people, but chronic insomnia can involve conditioned arousal, where the nervous system has learned to become alert in the very place it is supposed to let go. Clinical approaches such as cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia aim to change the thoughts, behaviours, timing, and associations that keep the brain awake. The goal is not to force sleep by willpower, because willpower is famously bad at becoming unconscious on command. The goal is to restore conditions in which sleep can happen more naturally. Another major disorder is obstructive sleep apnea. In obstructive sleep apnea, breathing is repeatedly interrupted during sleep because the upper airway becomes partly or completely blocked. Airflow drops, oxygen levels may fall, and the brain briefly wakes the body enough to reopen the airway. These awakenings can be so short that the person does not remember them, but they fragment sleep again and again across the night. The result can be heavy daytime sleepiness, morning headaches, poor concentration, irritability, and increased cardiovascular strain. Obstructive sleep apnea is linked with high blood pressure, heart rhythm problems, and other health risks. It also changes sleep quality because the brain keeps being pulled out of deeper stages to deal with breathing. The body may appear to be asleep for many hours, but the night is being broken into small interruptions. It is like trying to run a repair program, while someone keeps unplugging the machine every few minutes. Narcolepsy reveals a different kind of disruption. It is neurological disorder involving unstable boundaries between sleep and wakefulness. People with narcolepsy can experience overwhelming, daytime sleepiness and sudden episodes of sleep. Some also experience cataplexy, a sudden loss of muscle tone triggered by strong emotions such as laughter or surprise. This can happen while the person remains conscious, which shows how strangely the features of sleep can intrude into waking life. Narcolepsy is often connected with disruption of orexin signaling. Orexin, also called hypocretin, is a wakefulness-stabilizing neuropeptide that helps the brain maintain clear boundaries between being awake and being asleep. When orexin systems are damaged or deficient, those boundaries can become unstable. Features normally associated with rapid eye movement sleep, such as muscle atonia and vivid dreamlike experiences, may appear at unusual times. Narcolepsy shows that sleep is not merely an amount of rest. It is a regulated state that must begin, end, and remain contained at the right moments. Restless leg syndrome and periodic limb movements disturb sleep in another way. Restless leg syndrome involves uncomfortable sensations in the legs and an urge to move them, usually worse during rest and often stronger in the evening or at night. The sensations can make it hard to fall asleep because stillness becomes uncomfortable. Periodic limb movements involve repeated jerking or twitching movements during sleep, often in the legs. These movements can fragment sleep, sometimes without the sleeper fully noticing why the night felt unrefreshing. These conditions remind us that the body has to become still enough for sleep, but not because movement systems have vanished. Muscles, nerves, spinal circuits, brain signals, and sensory pathways all still exist beneath the blanket. If uncomfortable sensations or repeated movements keep disturbing sleep, the brain may struggle to remain in the steady patterns needed for deeper restoration. Clinical sleep medicine uses formal reference systems to define and classify these disorders. The International Classification of Sleep Disorders is an important guide used by clinicians and researchers to organize conditions such as insomnia, sleep apnea, narcolepsy, circadian rhythm, sleep-wake disorders, parasomnias, and sleep-related movement disorders. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine is also a major authority in sleep medicine, helping set standards for diagnosis, scoring, treatment guidance, and professional education. These classifications matter because sleep problems can look similar from the outside while having very different causes. Two people may both say they're tired, but one may have insomnia, another obstructive sleep apnea, another narcolepsy, another restless leg syndrome, and another an irregular circadian rhythm. The feeling of exhaustion is real in each case, but the underlying problem may be completely different. Good sleep medicine tries to identify the mechanism rather than simply counting hours in bed. This is important for the larger idea of rebuilding the brain. Sleep quantity matters, but quantity is not the whole story. A person needs enough sleep, but also sleep that is continuous enough, well-timed enough, properly structured enough, and physically stable enough to support restoration. Breathing has to remain effective. The brain has to move through sleep stages. The body has to stay sufficiently calm. The internal clock has to line up reasonably well with the sleeping period. When sleep disorders interfere, the brain may lose access to the full maintenance window it needs. Memory consolidation can be disrupted. Emotional regulation can suffer. Attention may become unsteady. Hormones and metabolism may be affected. The person may be technically asleep, but the sleeping brain is being interrupted, mistimed, or prevented from moving smoothly through its architecture. Sleep disorders make the hidden complexity of rest visible. They show that sleep is not just a passive absence of waking. It is an active biological achievement. For the brain to rebuild itself properly, many systems must cooperate. Airway muscles, chemical messengers, circadian clocks, arousal networks, movement pathways, stress systems, and the rhythms of non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep. When those systems work together, sleep can feel simple. When they do not, the simplicity disappears. Rest becomes fragile, scattered, or unreachable. And that fragility reminds us how remarkable ordinary sleep really is. A nightly act of coordination, quietly holding the body and brain in the conditions they need to repair, regulate, and return. The human brain evolved under skies that became bright by day and dark by night. For most of human history, evening meant firelight, moonlight, starlight, and the gradual quieting of the world. The body could read these changes. Light faded, temperature shifted, activity slowed. The nervous system received signals that night was arriving, and sleep could begin its ancient work. Modern life is not always so gentle with the sleeping brain. Artificial light can stretch the day far beyond sunset. Irregular schedules can pull sleep earlier one night and later the next. Shift work can ask the body to stay awake when its internal clock expects darkness. Late caffeine can block the sleepy message of adenosine. Noise can fragment the night. Stress can keep arousal systems active. Digital stimulation can fill the last quiet minutes before bed with messages, videos, news, arguments, bright images, and the extremely dangerous sentence, "Just one more." None of these things ruin sleep for everyone in the same way. The brain is adaptable, and people differ. One person may drink tea after dinner and sleep peacefully. Another may look at a coffee cup at lunchtime and feel personally haunted until midnight. The point is not that modern life makes sleep impossible. The point is that it adds many pressures that can push against the body's older rhythms. Light is one of the strongest of those pressures. The circadian system uses light as information. Specialized cells in the retina send signals to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the brain's master clock in the hypothalamus. Bright light, especially blue-enriched light, can tell the brain that it is still daytime. In the evening, this may delay melatonin release and shift the timing of sleep. Screens can contribute to this effect, especially when they are bright, close to the eyes, and used late at night. But it is too simple to say that one phone screen always destroys sleep. Brightness, timing, distance, content, personal sensitivity, and total light exposure all matter. A dim screen used briefly is not the same as hours of bright, emotionally stimulating content in bed. The light matters, but so does what the brain is doing with the information. A peaceful paragraph is not the same as a dramatic news headline, an argument, or a video designed to keep attention hooked like a fish that has made poor choices. Caffeine can also interfere with sleep timing and quality. It works mainly by blocking adenosine receptors, making the brain feel less sleepy while sleep pressure continues to build underneath. Because caffeine can remain active for several hours, using it late in the day may make it harder to fall asleep or may change the depth and smoothness of sleep. It does not remove the need for rest, it only masks part of the signal. Stress has its own effect. When the brain is worried, the body may remain in a more alert state. Cortisol, sympathetic nervous system activity, muscle tension, and repetitive thought can all keep the mind closer to wakefulness. A quiet room does not always create a quiet nervous system. Sometimes the body is still, but the brain is holding a full committee meeting about tomorrow, last week, and a strange comment someone made 3 years ago. Shift work creates an even larger mismatch. It asks people to work during biological night and sleep during biological day. This can disrupt circadian timing, reduce sleep duration, fragment rest, and affect alertness. Over time, circadian disruption has been linked with effects on metabolism, cardiovascular health, mood, and long-term disease risk. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified night shift work involving circadian disruption as probably carcinogenic to humans, reflecting concern about long-term biological misalignment, rather than any simple claim that one night shift causes disease. Social jet lag is another modern pattern. It describes the mismatch between a person's biological timing and social obligations. Many people sleep on one schedule during work days and another on free days. They may wake early all week, then sleep much later at the weekend. This feels like catching up, and sometimes extra rest may help, but the shifting schedule can also confuse circadian timing. The body is not travelling across time zones, but the internal clock may still feel dragged back and forth. Sleep hygiene can help support better rest. It includes habits such as keeping a regular sleep schedule, getting morning light, reducing bright light late in the evening, limiting late caffeine, creating a comfortable sleep environment, using the bed mostly for sleep, and giving the mind time to wind down. These behaviours are not magic spells, though it would be convenient if cool dark room worked like an incantation. They are supports that make sleep more likely to unfold naturally. At the same time, serious sleep disorders usually need more than simple lifestyle advice. Insomnia, obstructive sleep apnea, narcolepsy, restless leg syndrome, circadian rhythm disorders, and other conditions may require clinical assessment and treatment. Sleep hygiene can support the system, but it cannot reopen a blocked airway, restore orexin signaling, or resolve every form of chronic arousal by itself. The modern world often treats sleep like an optional subscription service that can be cancelled whenever the plot gets interesting. But the brain's maintenance systems evolved for rhythm, light and dark, activity and rest, pressure building, and pressure fading. When modern life repeatedly disrupts that rhythm, the brain may still try to rebuild itself, but it must do so under less favourable conditions. Sleep needs time, timing, darkness, continuity, and calm enough chemistry to do its work well. The world outside may be brighter, louder, faster, and more demanding than ever, but the sleeping brain remains ancient in its needs. It still listens for the quiet signals of night. It still asks for a protected space in which memory, emotion, chemistry, and repair can gently return to balance. By morning, if sleep has done its work well, the brain has not become a new object. It has not been replaced, polished, and quietly returned to the skull before sunrise. It is still the same brain carrying the same life, the same memories, the same habits, the same worries, and quite possibly the same unfinished task that was politely ignored yesterday. But it may be better ordered than it was before. Sleep rebuilds the brain through many overlapping processes, not through one hidden repair switch. There is no single lever that gets pulled in the dark. Instead, the night is made of coordination. Sleep pressure rises through waking hours and fades during rest. Circadian timing helps place sleep within the wider rhythm of light, darkness, temperature, and hormones. Sleep stages cycle through the night, shifting between lighter sleep, deeper slow-wave sleep, and rapid eye movement sleep. Each state offers a different setting for the brain's work. Some of that work is memory. The sleeping brain helps stabilize new learning, linking fresh experiences with older knowledge. The hippocampus and neocortex continue their quiet conversation, allowing some memories to become more durable while others fade into the background. The day is not preserved exactly as it happened. It is sorted, edited, softened, and woven into a larger pattern. In this sense, waking up is not only returning to the world, it is returning with yesterday slightly reorganized. Some of the work is emotional. Sleep helps regulate the relationship between the amygdala, the medial prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, and the body's stress chemistry. Feelings are not erased, and painful memories are not simply dissolved by the pillow. But sleep may help reduce the rawness around ordinary emotional experiences. It can help the mind keep the lesson without carrying quite as much of the sting. Sometimes a problem still exists in the morning, but it no longer fills the whole sky. Some of the work is physical and chemical. The glymphatic system may help move cerebrospinal fluid through brain tissue, supporting the clearance of certain waste products. Synaptic tuning may help rebalance connections between neurons after a day of learning and stimulation. Hormonal rhythms influence growth hormone, cortisol, appetite signals, glucose regulation, and immune coordination. The brain does not rebuild in isolation, because it is not an isolated organ floating politely inside the skull. It is part of the body, and the body sleeps with it. Sleep also protects attention. Without enough of it, the mind becomes less steady. Reaction time slows, working memory weakens, judgment becomes less reliable, emotional control becomes more fragile. The tired brain may still insist it is fine, which is one of its less charming talents, but performance often tells a different story. Sleep gives the brain time to restore the conditions needed for clear attention and flexible choice, and yet sleep science is still developing. Researchers have strong evidence that sleep supports memory, emotion, metabolism, immunity, brain clearance, and cognitive performance. But the exact relationships between these processes remain complex. Slow-wave sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, sleep spindles, hormones, neurotransmitters, glial cells, and circadian rhythms do not act as separate little departments with tidy labels. They interact. They overlap. They influence one another in ways scientists are still working to map. That is why sleep laboratories, neuroimaging, electroencephalography, longitudinal health studies, and clinical sleep medicine remain so important. Sleep laboratories allow researchers and clinicians to measure brain waves, breathing, muscle activity, eye movement, and heart rhythms during the night. Neuroimaging helps reveal how brain regions change across sleep and wakefulness. Electroencephalography shows the electrical rhythms of the sleeping brain. Longitudinal health studies follow people over time, helping scientists understand how sleep relates to aging, disease risk, mood, memory, and daily function. Clinical sleep medicine helps translate this knowledge into care for people whose sleep has become disrupted. The science is detailed, but the experience remains intimate. Each night a person lies down and lets go of the waking world. The room becomes quiet. Thoughts lose their sharp edges. Awareness thins and then slips away. From the inside it may feel like absence. But beneath that absence the brain continues its soft and intricate work. It changes chemistry. It shifts through stages. It revisits memories. It tunes connections. It calms some signals and strengthens others. It clears, balances, protects, and prepares. That may be the quietest beauty of sleep. It is ordinary enough to be overlooked, common enough to be taken for granted, and fragile enough to be easily disturbed. Yet beneath the still face of rest, it is astonishingly active. Sleep is one of biology's most familiar miracles, a nightly return to darkness that helps make waking possible again. Sleep rebuilds the brain, but not through one grand hidden switch in the dark. There's no single dramatic moment when the mind is repaired all at once. Instead, the work is quiet, layered, and patient. Across the night, many processes gather together. Chemistry shifts, rhythms settle, memories are shaped, emotions are softened, waste is cleared, and the brain prepares itself for another day of being awake. The pressure for sleep builds while the eyes are open, and circadian timing helps guide the body toward rest. Sleep architecture carries the brain through light sleep, deep slow wave sleep, and rapid eye movement sleep. Deep sleep supports restoration and memory stability. Dreaming reveals the brain's strange internal theatre. Emotional processing helps turn raw experience into something more manageable. The glymphatic system may help clear waste through cerebrospinal fluid. Synaptic tuning may rebalance connections after a day of learning. Hormones, appetite signals, immunity, stress chemistry, attention, aging, sleep disorders, and the modern world all shape how well this delicate work can unfold. Sleep is scientifically active, but personally intimate. From the inside it feels like absence. The self fades, time disappears, the room is lost. Yet from the brain's point of view, sleep is not absence at all. It is work without awareness. And still, the science is not finished. Researchers continue to study the full meaning of dreams, the details of glymphatic clearance in humans, and the precise ways memory, emotion, and neural plasticity interact across the night. Sleep is familiar, but not fully solved. So when the body lies still and the room grows quiet, the brain is not abandoning the day. It is tending to it. It is sorting what mattered, softening what hurt, clearing what built up, and preparing the mind that will slowly rise into morning.